welcome in everyone here for the Grand Finals of our Conquest tournament here for the Des Moines Pokemon Discord group. Today we have from the upper bracket Lucas here. Lucas is playing Gardevoir, Cloth, and Archaladon, starting on Gardevoir. And Will, coming from the losers bracket, is playing Charizard, Gardevoir, and Lawson Pikachu, starting with the Lawson engine.
Who are you feeling has a advantage looking at the decks that they chose?
I think a lot of it's going to come down to the order of the decks. That's going to be a big thing, especially for sure in this first game. I'm leaning towards Will on the Pikachu, right? Going to be favored into that Gardevoir. Archaladon's a pretty hard matchup into both Charizard and Gardevoir as well for Lucas. So finding a win with that Archaladon could become pretty difficult, but it's all going to be about, I think, this first game. Because if this Archaladon gets to play against the Lawson deck, it could try to get a win that way. But we'll have to see. We'll have to see. For those not familiar with Conquest, Conquest is both players chose 3 different decks to come to the table, and they have to win a game with each deck. So once you win a game with one deck, you put it away and go on to the next one. So you have to win 3 games with 3 unique decks here. We've been doing that we started with 16 players, double elim, and now we're down to 2. This is the first of the grand finals, so if Will wins this, it will be a bracket reset. We're doing true double elimination, and we'll meet on a different day for the bracket reset where they can choose all new decks and go again at this best of 5. So it looks like Will is going first in this one, playing that Lawson deck, opening up with the Sableye, has a Comfy in hand and gets to go Buddy Poffin here. He's going to do a little bit of prize checking. Might grab 2 Comfies, maybe just 1 here. We'll see. We'll see what the deck looks like.
Sometimes it's a little hard to tell when you can't see what's in their hand.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Not knowing exactly what's in Will's hand has us guessing just as much as Lucas's at sometimes.
Yeah, and with a lot of these Lost Zone variants, there's a lot of one-ofs that in certain matchups that you want to check and make sure that you have in your deck, so you don't accidentally set yourself up in a rough spot when you were doing your prizes.
Exactly. We already know we have access to that Sableye, a typical one-of for the deck, but going to be wanting to check that Psychic Energy, also a typical one-of, so we can actually use the Sableye. Want to make sure we have as many gates as we can, Mirage gates to use, etc., etc.
And this might end up not being a game where Pikachu actually ends up shining a lot in this, simply just due to the fact that that Monkey Dory can place a damage counter on it and turn off that Pikachu's ability. So we'll probably see a lot more of these single prize attackers throughout this match.
Oh, for sure. Definitely going to be a lot more single prize focused in this matchup for Will. We might see something like the Iron Hands come in to skew that prize trade a little bit, but other than that, I expect to see a lot of Cramorant, a lot of Sableye, and Will trying to work Greninja into the mix as well.
Looks like that Psychic Energy wasn't prized, so that's going to give him access to Sableye later on in this game. Sableye does end up being pretty beneficial in this matchup, especially because Gardevoir's main attackers tend to be a little bit squishier, and after they attack, they tend to not have a lot of HP left.
Exactly. Going to be able to take 2 prize turns that way. If Lucas leaves something like a Screamtail or a Drifloon pretty low, going to be able to clean up that knockout as well as take out something like a Curly on the bench. It's going to be very important how Lucas is able to use this Monkey Dory, though, to try to keep things out of knockout range. It's especially towards the mid-game when Gardevoir has to manually retreat things like the Curlias or the Gardevoirs. Puts quite a bit of damage on those, so especially if a Curlia has to keep some damage on it, it's going to make it even easier for Sableye to have some of those clean up 2 prize turns.
Now, one thing I'm curious about both players is I'm curious if Will is playing multiple water energies. Some decks have actually dropped down to even just playing 1. So he can maybe be able to utilize that Radiant Greninja, because that's also pretty strong into this matchup. And then I'm curious if Lucas is potentially playing Manaphy. I know some lists have cut it, but if he does have it and that Radiant Greninja ends up being live, that Manaphy will save him a lot of trouble in the future.
So I'm looking at the list now. They were kind enough to send me all of their lists before the matchup. So we can reference it a little bit. It looks like Lucas is playing the Mana Fee, so that's going to be a pretty important card here for him in this matchup. And for Will, let's see how many of those water energies Will is playing. I've seen 1, 2, or 3. But it looks like in this list, Will is playing... let me find it here. Looks like Will is playing 3 of those water energies. Yep, so he's going to have access to that Greninja throughout the game, as long as 2 of them aren't prized or sent over to the Lost Zone.
Now that Flutter Mane right there is definitely going to come in handy for Lucas this matchup too, because that's going to turn off all of those Comfy's abilities to be able to put things into the Lost Zone. If he pushes that Flutter Mane up, which I'm expecting will probably happen here, that's going to make it much harder for Will to be able to get through his strategy for the Lost Zone deck. He's going to have to come up with a way to either gust it out of the way or find other ways to be able to get cards in the Lost Zone to get his engine rolling, like Colress's Experiment, maybe Lost Vacuum.
Oh, for sure. Going to have to lean a lot heavier on like those Colresses to get that Lost Zone built up if that Flutter Mane ends up getting stuck in the active. Because it looks like Will is not playing something like the Iron Bundle that we've seen in the past from Lost Zone decks. So other than something like a Boss's Orders or the use of the Prime Catcher, Will cannot move that Flutter Mane out of the active.
Looks like we went ahead and Artisan for a Cramorant. It did look like Will grabbed a Pokestop off his draw for turn, so we'll probably end up seeing that Artisan get bumped out of the way here just to prevent Lucas from being able to get more Pokemon onto the bench. Make him work for it a little bit more here.
Oh, for sure. Also going to make it a little bit easier for Will to find things like those Lost Vacuums to keep building that Lost Zone, and there it is. Already has a way to get up to 5 here in the Lost Zone with the Vacuum.
That was a really good Pokestop.
Oh yeah, that's exactly what you want to see.
It does look like Will has that Prime Catcher in hand as well too. He might actually elect to play that just to get his turns going here.
Oh yep, and is going to use that here just to start getting up to that important 10 number for the Lost Zone, especially in this matchup here. Wants to get to 10 as fast as possible. It's very good that they were able to get triple Comfy off on turn 1. Gonna help them out a lot here. Flutter Mane trying to do a good job of stopping it, but...
Yeah, and you see he just put that Ursaluna into the Lost Zone. That Ursaluna doesn't have the greatest matchup into this match. Sometimes you can utilize it to maybe hit that Gardevoir EX if they end up electing to keep it on the board with some damage counters on it. But most of the time, it doesn't really fare too well into this matchup.
Exactly, yeah. With it having 310 and the Ursaluna only doing 340, it's not often that you're going to find a Gardevoir sticking on the board with 7 damage counters. You can use it to threaten for Sableye knockouts, but with Monkey Dory access and things like the Professor's Turo, which Lucas is playing at copies of 2 of in the deck, it's not going to be a super reliable strategy for Will this game to take multiple prizes.
Now it does look like Will is going to be setting up for that Radiant Greninja, being able to take out those 2 Ralts this turn, which is going to be very big for him to keep that tempo ahead on his end. Because it looks like with that Lost Vacuum, he'll be up to 7 now. He can Mirage Gate for the other water he needs. And then as long as he has a way to switch that Comfy out of the way and bring that Greninja up, he'll be taking 2 prizes this turn.
Exactly. And it's going to be a huge, huge turn for Will here, putting on a lot of pressure. Still going to be interesting to see what Will can do after this turn here, because going to be losing 2 of those energies. Is committing that Mirage Gate now. So we're going to be down, I believe, 3 Mirage Gates with 1 being Lost Zoned.
That's what it looks like here. That means the grind game is going to be a little bit slower for Will in terms of energy acceleration. However, that does not prevent him from necessarily being completely out of it once that last Mirage Gate is out of the way. He'll just have to play a little bit more tactfully and, like I said, rely on a lot of these single prizers that either need 1 or 0 energy in regards like with Cramorant.
Exactly. Sableye being a super efficient attacker, Cramorant being a very good response to any of the main attackers from the Gardevoir deck. Is going to be very, very nice for Will here.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong. Monkey Dory has 110 HP too, right?
Has 120.
It has 120. Okay, so
it
it's
is
just a little bit
not
out of
in
there.
knockout range for Cramorant, but it is able to be knocked out from one Sableye attack. Importantly. Very interesting to see Will was able to get to 7 without using a single Colress. So if Will can start finding some of these Colresses, experiments, we'll be at 10 pretty quickly here.
Man, I wish I had that kind of luck playing Lost Zone. I usually need at least one Colress in order to get me there.
Yeah, starting with the turn 1 going first, getting off 3 Comfeys is very, very nice. It's the type of start you want to see, especially against like something like Regidrago, where you can get a bunch in the Lost Zone without putting a Colress in the discard pile for QREM. But neither player opting to bring Regidrago today. Historically, I've played against both of them in the tournament. Both of them played Regidrago against me, so it's kind of interesting to see that neither of them are playing the Regidrago today.
So it looks like Lucas elected for only 1 Ralts, so I'm going to take a guess that that 4th Ralts might be in the prizes. Looks like he got the TM Evo ready. This could be a very, very strong turn for Will if he's able to get that Ralts off the board. Being able to prevent him from getting into Gardevoir, especially after taking 2 prize cards, and getting maybe a 3rd one without any sort of Kirlia setup here, could end up being very, very rough for Lucas in order to be able to get back into this game.
So we are at least going to get 2 more Ralts down. Being able to find Buddy Poffin and the Rod off of the Iono is really good. But especially because we didn't see the Manaphy come down off the first Buddy Poffin before the Iono, I would go to guess that the Manaphy is also prized here, which is kind of unlucky. But we are at least able to get into the TM Evo turn, get some Curlias on board, and say, next turn I am going to start attacking.
Now, a good question we are kind of trying to figure out here is if Will is got that last Mirage Gate or has a way to get to it pretty quickly. And then if he decides if he wants to elect that last Mirage Gate to another Greninja play, I think would probably end up being one of the better options for an attack this turn. If he decides not to, though, he might be looking to just start putting some pressure on with that Sableye or maybe even a Cramorant Punch.
Yeah, even a Cramorant Punch here, I don't hate. Get 110 on the Monkey Dory. Sure, they're going to be able to Adrenabrain 30 off of it, put themselves down to 80 health, but you can still clean it up and a Kirlia next turn by going 4 onto the Monkey Dory, 8 onto the Kirlia, so still setting up for a 2-prize turn is not bad. Especially against Gardevoir, a very Iono heavy deck, a Disruption heavy deck. Staying on 4 prizes for another turn instead of going lower is never going to be a bad thing here. Setting up for multiple explosive turns. Looks
like we had 2 energy hit the Lost Zone here. Does get a little bit scary, especially still wanting to utilize that Mirage Gate, but keep in mind this Lost Box deck, especially with the Pikachu iteration, does tend to play quite a bit of energy options here, so if he doesn't have it in the deck, he's got ways to put it back with Super Rod.
Exactly, and we already see the Super Rod in the hand here for Will, if they were able to find the Mirage Gate, but it looks like we're not going to find the Mirage Gate yet. Maybe Monkey Dory does only have 110? I want to look it up real quick?
Yeah.
Because I could have sworn it was 120, but
I wasn't 100% sure here.
I'm assuming, since it is knocked out, it is just 110.
Yep, it is 110.
It is just the 110, so the Cramorant able to efficiently knock it out.
So that actually makes Cramorant quite a bit better going into this matchup as well, because that's a 1-prizer that can take out something that can actually do a lot of threatening against your board. Setting up those little damage ticks with Monkey Dory, especially with Gardevoir's energy acceleration, putting that damage on the board, can really set you up for some really, really strong Screamtail plays in the future. And now that Lucas has 3 Kirlia on the board, it looks like we're probably going to start seeing some attacks from him on his side. Now the question is going to really come down to if he's going to be able to keep himself in this game pretty effectively with not really having a lot of options to get multiple prizes off the board.
If I'm Lucas this turn, I'm trying to think what I would be looking to do here. What's your best attack in this scenario? It might just be going back into the Flutter Mane. If you can
take out that
Countercatcher the Sableye here and get a Flutter Mane attack on it, start setting up damage onto something like a Comfy, so you can start to take multiple prize turns. If you can reestablish that Monkey Dory with the Dark Energy, might be your best options here.
Yeah, getting that Sableye off the board means that he's going to need a Super Rod or multiple ways to get both the Pokemon and the energy back into the deck to be able to put that back on board. Now we'll have to wait and see if that really commitment to that Sableye with Psychic is going to end up being a detriment to him, or if Lucas is going to maybe ignore that and maybe take out this Cramorant instead.
Yeah, we'll have to see what we grab off this Arven here. I think that's going to be pretty telling of what the rest of the turn is going to look like for Lucas. But I definitely think, especially with 3 Mirage Gates being down on Will's side, that targeting that Sableye with a deck that's still pretty thick, probably about 20 cards or so, finding that Psychic Energy again is going to be a pretty big commitment. If we can take this Sableye out now, Will might only be able to use it one more time this game. Especially because we haven't been using Colress. We haven't been thinning the deck very well with Colress at all, so going to be a lot harder to find that Sableye again, and the Psychic Energy naturally.
Did Lucas opt to play Stamp for this build, or is he maybe going with the Secret Box? I know that one's pretty popular.
We are playing the Stamp in this build on the side of Lucas. Yep.
Stamp can definitely turn the tide for Lucas here too in Lost Box. Yes, they do have the ability to use Comfy, and they have those Colress experiments. However, that Stamp can really slow the tempo down, especially when Lost Box's main strategy is basically pushing through your deck as much as possible. Generally, you're going to end up with a pretty large hand. Sometimes you end up holding on to some resources that you're hoping to be able to use in the future turns. So if Lucas is able to get to that Stamp and maybe get a good attack off on the Sableye, that could potentially put Lucas in a much better position here, and maybe even a position to come back in this game pretty swiftly.
Oh, for sure. I definitely, honestly, if I'm Will, I'm wishing that Monkey Dory did have 120 last turn, so I don't take the knockout, set up for that 2 prize turn, and not let Lucas play an unfair Stamp against me this turn.
Looks like he's gonna go for maybe even attacking with this Gardevoir here.
Yep, it is going to be the Gardevoir attack here. Putting it in the active, has 280 now, the bear is out of the way, but this is a turn that Will could just bring in the Pikachu and take 2 prize cards with the Pikachu here pretty consistently.
In order to do that, he's just going to need to utilize that last Mirage Gate here. We'll just kind of have to wait and see exactly what he's got going for him for his turn. Does look like he's picking up 2 Nest Balls, so he'll be able to get that Pikachu out if he decides he wants to go that route.
So we have access to the Pikachu. That does get us to 10 right there with that flower selecting. So we will have access to Sableye this turn if we just opt to target something like that Kirlia this turn instead.
Does look like that Mirage Gate is in his hand too, so it just kind of comes down to if he has those energies in the deck, and if he doesn't, does he have a way to manipulate the discard pile to be able to put those energies back. I'm going to take a guess that with all those cards in his hand, he's probably got 1 Super Rod hiding in there somewhere.
Yep, has at least 1 Super Rod in the hand we saw earlier, but the bigger thing is going to be, do we have attach for turn onto that Pikachu?
You know,
with
that is
only 1 Mirage Gate. We discarded the 1 Metal Energy with the Greninja earlier, and the other one's in the Lost Zone. There's a Grass in the Lost Zone. I know we're down Lightning as well in the discard pile, so the question is just going to be, do we have the last Lightning or the last Grass in hand right now?
It did look like he did have an energy in hand there. I couldn't tell exactly what it was though. He's got some very, very shiny sleeves. They must be new because they got a pretty strong glare on them.
Yeah, especially those outer sleeves. They like to glare a lot. Looks like with the Super Rod, I heard we're putting in Cram, Water, and another energy. So we might be lining up for a Greninja attack this turn, which also I don't hate. Going for something like this Greninja attack onto both of the Kirlias here, just going to try and disrupt with Lucas's draw engine, has the Cramorant on board to threaten game next turn. The most important thing is just getting a 2 prize turn this turn for Will, whether that's through the Pikachu or through that Greninja.
And now that you say that, I definitely think that this Greninja play probably will end up being better in the long run. Just because disrupting the draw power for Gardevoir makes it very hard for them to be able to come up. Actually, looks like he's going to go for a Sableye, Lost Mine. He's going to put counters on Kirlia and Greninja. So he's going to take 1, and then he's probably going to go ahead and hold that Mirage Gate maybe for a chance to just be able to take a 2 prize turn next turn. Now, does Lucas have that ability to do some hand disruption, maybe with an Iono or an Unfair Stamp?
Yeah, that's what I'm most scared of right now, is the fact that we still have a Curly on board, we still have to find a 2 prize turn next turn as Will, and we took a knockout, so Lucas is able to use that Unfair Stamp this turn. We still have not used a single Colress, though, on Will's side, so we have a decent amount of draw outs from this Unfair Stamp if we need to, but still can be scary getting set down to 2 prizes here.
That Bravery Charm getting discarded off that Pokestop can definitely hurt a little bit for this Gardevoir matchup. Thankfully, you don't need it for a lot of the Pokemon that come up, but it does help you keep your stuff alive and makes it a little bit harder for those Lost Mines to take out some of those basic Pokemon that are a little bit on the weaker end.
For sure.
Looks like an Iono was played, so Will did get disrupted a little bit. He's only got a hand of 2 cards now. Looks like he went ahead and showed us a Colress and a Super Rod.
So we are able to find that Colress finally. It's gonna help a lot in this next turn to try and find that closing turn. But the bad news for Will is that going for this Gardevoir is no longer going to be an option. If Lucas opts to move the damage counters off of this Gardevoir EX, then it will have 310 HP, so we cannot just knock it out with a Pikachu anymore. We have to go for that Greninja turn.
Now, I reckon with the cards that Will has in hand, would you say that it's probably more beneficial to play that Super Rod first in order to shuffle to try and get some of those cards that you might need to be able to get maybe shuffled up and potentially drawn off that Colress's?
Especially if that last Mirage Gate was in the hand that got sent to the bottom of the deck, we're going to...
Oh.
Oh.
Looks like there might have been a deck
Looks
list
like there's
error
a
here.
deck list error here. Okay. We were playing 5 switches, so must have had some issue putting decks together. To note as well, for this Conquest format, we are playing in the format that we started in. So we started in January, so before Prismatic came out, even though Prismatic is now legal, so both of these players I talked to before the match, they had the annoyingly long process of having to go back through and taking cards out of their deck and putting them back into the previous format's lists. So guessing that some error when we were taking Lost Box and making it not Prismatic format ended up with slightly wrong counts here. So it's like Will's just going to be checking their deck, checking the contents, and how many cards are in the deck, just so we can make sure that going into this next game, everything will be correct. But for the time, this is going to be marked as, I can hear from the table, a game loss for Will. So Lucas will be getting the win with this Gardevoir deck, and Will be down 0-1 going into this next game.
And that's always a bit unfortunate when stuff like that happens, especially in the commanding position that Will had put himself in this previous game. It looked like as long as he was able to get to that Mirage Gate, he would have been able to probably push himself for a win that game. He would have had the option to Greninja for the Flutter Mane, as well as that Kirlia or even that Radiant Greninja to take those last 2 prize cards. That's why it's always important whenever you're at a big tournament once you submit your deck list, especially for regionals and stuff like that, you want to always double check and make sure that everything is correct before you sit down for your first round. You never want to be put in a position where you might end up losing a game due to a very simple deck list error. Now, like Tanner said, though, we do have a lot of decks coming down to the table, especially with Conquest. It could have been maybe just one of those situations where he was getting something ready and maybe accidentally just grabbed that extra switch there without even realizing.
I'm honestly surprised that I didn't make an error like this, because for my Conquest, I decided to go with a strategy of true Conquest, both as an attempt just to have fun and try some new decks, but also to make sure my future round opponents couldn't predict what I was doing. So every single round, I played brand new decks. I did not repeat a deck at all. So I'm surprised with me switching decks around all the time that I didn't end up doing something like this at some point along the line.
Tanner decided to mystery approach for Conquest, and it definitely paid out until that last little bit there, where unfortunately just the luck just wasn't there for that last game to get him pushed up into the finals here.
Yeah, Alex Szymanski's list did not do me too well in my last round against Will, but it's to be expected. Especially when you're switching decks around all.
Hey, you got a lot farther than me in the Conquest matches. I had some pretty rough matchups, and I did not have a lot of deck thought process in terms of what I wanted to play. I kind of just took 3 decks that I felt somewhat comfortable with, and first round I went up against Nick Robinson. Anybody who's familiar, he's a very good player, national champion. Reigning and defending national champion. And he proceeded to absolutely cook me in our 3 games. And then my loser's bracket round was against Ken, and he was playing Dragapult, Regidrago, and Arkelodon, and the decks that I had brought to the table just were not very good matchups in the order that I needed to put them in, which that's kind of the thing about Conquest, is you never really know what you're going against until you really flip those cards over. So sometimes, even though you have some decks that have good matchups, you might end up playing your deck against the worst matchup imaginable.
Yeah, it's always interesting to me that on paper, if you look at 3 decks, you could end up looking at your decks and being like, oh, I think that I should have a good matchup into these. More of my decks are more favored into more of their decks, but the order is so important that if you just get the wrong order on your decks, it can completely flip. That's kind of what happened with me in my matchup with Will as well. Just with the order that the decks came up, I ended up having to play... I was going to have to play Raging Bolt against Charizard, rather than if we did the decks in a different order, I would have been able to play Raging Bolt against Regidrago, which is a much better matchup for the deck, depending on who you ask. But the order mattering so much just adds an extra element to, even if you have more decks that are favored on paper going into it, it's all about what deck you pull out in what order. Did you have any strategies when you were going into it of which deck you would start with and which ones you would try to use first or last or anything?
I think a lot of my strategy came from, we all play together in our same local area, so a lot of us kind of know some of the personalities of our players, and some people have their preferred pet decks and favorite decks. So some of the strategy I implemented when I was playing was trying to kind of figure out and gauge what my opponent might actually pick first based on their personal preference of deck. I felt pretty confident that when I went up against Nick that I knew there was going to be a Regidrago in there and a control deck, which I was correct about.
Yep.
However, I didn't feel like he was going to use those first, and the third deck, I was not entirely sure what he was going to bring to the table, so I kind of had to pick a deck that I felt was a little bit more well-rounded going into that first round, and it ended up being Lugia, if I remember correctly, that I took. And now I can't remember what he was playing off the top of my head because it's been a month and a half, but ended up losing that first game, and then I had Snorlax as my second deck of options and ended up being able to bring it back. Unfortunately, he did bring Regidrago as his anchor, and most of the decks that I had brought to the first round for Conquest, as much as I wanted to be prepared for Regidrago, I felt that we were going to see a lot more variety going into that first round, so I was feeling a little bit more on the back end about worrying about Regidrago, and I probably should have been a bit more prepared.
A little bit more respectful of the best deck in the room.
Yeah. But I figured I was taking some decks that we haven't really seen running around locals as often during this format, so I felt that might have given me a little bit more of an edge with some of the powers like Lugia. We have seen it occasionally here and there at our local tournaments, but it went from being a pretty front runner when I started playing, which was when Charizard was considered the best deck of the format.
Oh, sure.
And then it lost a lot of its popularity after Dragapult came out. And as we've evolved through the meta, we've seen a lot less and less players overall playing the deck. So that's why I ended up taking Lugia, because I felt like it had a good matchup against a lot of these other decks. I just knew that certain matchups were going to be very, very rough, especially ones that utilize Dust Noir. Because if I can't get those gift energies or that legacy energy to pop, sometimes that can end up just being an end of a game for me.
Yeah, especially if they hit you with like an Iono and you're like, all right, I really need these gift draws to try to make sure I can keep pushing this game, pushing that 2-2-2 prize race that you're going for a decent amount of the time. And just Dusknoir being able to avoid that is definitely annoying. Definitely annoying.
Now, how are you feeling about Lugia now that Regigigas is out?
I like Lugia a lot, actually. I think that Regigigas card that we got in Prismatic Evolution is a game changer. I think any deck that can power it up should be playing it. So I think your Lost Zone engines should be playing it, your Lugia should be playing it, even something like Chen Pao coming back around and playing it.
You know, I've heard a couple people talk about that, playing that in Chen Pao. When I was in Toronto for the regional up there, obviously this was before Prismatic had came out, but I actually saw a very interesting local player playing Grand Tree.
Interesting. Grand Tree.
Yeah, so they could put their Greninja EX straight onto the board and be able to start smacking with it, utilizing that Baxcalibur to attach energy.
That's interesting. I kind of like that idea. I like that idea. All right. I will be back in 1 second. I will leave you all with Alex here. The players are asking for me to deck check this deck real quick. We will be moving on to game though pretty soon. Will has said that they will not be playing Lost Box for this. So I'm just going to go grab that deck from Will. Alex will keep you company, and they should be setting up for game 2 here momentarily.
I just want to take this time to thank Atlas Games for providing us a play space as well as a stream setup for this finals here for Conquest. We actually just recently got them set up for League through Pokemon. So if you guys are in the area, we are going to be having our League nights on Sundays from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. Now, if you guys want to show up a little earlier or come a little later, we'll probably be here. But feel free to come out and check out our league. We're trying to build it up so we can kind of get a good community going here. And I also just want to say thank you to Cole for letting us get all of this set up. Because without him and his shop, we would not be able to broadcast this as well as we are today.
Gave me a little bit of insight too, the both of them, on what deck we're going to be playing next. So this next matchup, Lucas is going over to that Archaladon, and Will is going to Charizard. So that's going to be our next matchup here.
Now, on paper, Charizard's going to be very favored into this matchup, especially when you get past those first couple prize cards for Archaladon. Once they get down to 2 prize cards remaining, that Charizard will be able to take one-shots on any of those Archaladons, making it quite easy for him to be able to push his way into this game. Generally, Charizard's strategy in this matchup is to still end up trying to get, within a pretty similar range of prizes throughout the match. But once Archaladon gets down to those last 2 prizes, it's going to be a lot harder for him to be able to clean up this game without being able to boss up one of the smaller 2 prize Pokemon, or being able to find a way to work around that Charizard.
Exactly. It's all going to come down to how well can Will manage their bench, liabilities can they keep off of the bench, and how fast can Lucas get going. I played Archaladon recently to San Antonio, and I found the Charizard matchup to be the most difficult matchup that I had to play against all day. Other than actually Conkeldurr. Conkeldurr I found to be an even harder matchup, but of the traditional matchups you're going to see, Charizard felt like the most difficult one for me.
Archelodon definitely has a very simple strategy. You put your bridges down, then you build bigger bridges, and then those bridges hit for a pretty good amount of damage pretty easily. It's got that self-acceleration from the discard pile to make it really easy to attack. The only downside that the deck has really come into is against these really, really high HP stage 2 Pokemon like Gardevoir and Charizard. Dragapult, because it doesn't hit for a ton of damage, does actually tend to be a pretty favorable matchup as long as you are able to establish a good enough board to be able to loop your big bridge from getting knocked out. Into Charizard, it's definitely a little bit harder because they have access to things like potentially Dusknoir to take out your little Duraludons, make it harder for you to be able to loop those big bridges. And then with Gardevoir, they also have things like Turos to get their 2 prize liabilities off the board. So this game is going to really rely on Lucas being able to resource manage himself and prevent those knockouts from happening while he also takes prize cards.
Exactly. It's definitely going to be interesting to see if Lucas is able to keep those Archelodons alive and not just get one shot. Because especially Charizard, why I find it such a hard matchup is because of that Dusknoir, like you mentioned. But if Will can't find those Dusknoirs, then Lucas has the power to say, okay, I can reset these Archelodons and deny you from taking prize cards, and has that opportunity to start putting a lot of pressure onto the Charizard player. But it's all going to come down to, can Will find the Dusknoir plays to take the one-shots? And can Lucas reset those Archelodons when Will misses it?
Another really big player in this Archelodon matchup for Charizard is going to be that Relicanth. That Relicanth allows him to use the Pokemon's attacks from previous evolutions, and one of the attacks on that Duraludon allows you to do 80 damage plus 10 for every damage counter on it. So when you get into that later game, sometimes it's actually beneficial for that to let them have that Charizard hit your Archelodon, bring it down to 30 HP when they're at.
Depends on how many prize cards you've taken, but if you've taken about 2 prize cards, they're going to hit you for 240. Yeah, bring you down to 60 HP.
Yeah, so like anywhere from that 240 to 270 range, that Relicanth's going to allow them to be able to use that, I believe it's Hammer...
Hammering's the first attack. The second one is going to be your retaliation attack.
Yeah, but that retaliation attack, as long as you got those damage counters on it, allows you to take that one shot on the Charizard. Otherwise, there's going to probably be a lot of poking and prodding and maybe setting up for future knockouts rather than just taking those one-shot knockouts with that Relicanth on board.
Exactly. It's also going to be interesting to see if Lucas is able to utilize the Dialga V-Star, too, to try and take some extra turns and skew the prize trade that way. It's another way that the Archelodon can try and squeak out those last few prize cards that they need to close the game. Especially at the very end of the game, it can be pretty hard. You can get into the point where, okay, I need to take 2 prize cards here to end the game, or I just lose. And you have to then find that V-Star on that turn to go through a Charizard EX. Because oftentimes the Charizards will try to make it so you don't have any other 2 prize liabilities to target down, like your Rotom, like a fish, or like try and turn up the Pidgeot just to get it out of play and say you have to deal with this Charizard EX right now, or I'm just winning the game next turn.
So it looks like Will is going to get a bit aggro here. He went ahead and rare candy into that Pidgeot, went ahead and searched rare candy. He's going to be evolving into that Charizard, and that Charizard's going to allow him to accelerate some more energy from his deck onto any of his Pokemon. What I'm going to guess is, yep, 1 to the Rotom, 1 to that Charizard. He's going to go ahead and retreat into that Charizard more than likely and be able to take that first knockout for the game. Charizard being able to get really aggressive on these Duraludons early is very helpful. However, he does have to keep in mind it's a lot harder for him to get his Charizard off the board unless he wants to go ahead and utilize that Turos to be able to scoop it up.
Exactly. that Turo's just a one-of in the deck with no POW pad, so we get to do it once a game, that's it. So you want to make sure when you do use it, it's the right time, because you can't do it again. It is at least going to be able to use the Thornton, though, to get rid of like this Rotom V at some point, or like a Pheasantipity if it comes down later in the game, or Luminion. But for those stage 2s, we have to be relying on that Turo. So we only get one. Do we want to reset a Charizard with it? Do we want to take the Pidgeot off the board? That's kind of the debate that we have to make here.
Looks like
a Charizard player.
Looks like Will's going to go ahead and pop in. I'm going to guess for that Duskull to be able to start working that Dusknoir line. That's going to be very helpful in this matchup, just because that's either going to force Lucas to lose one of those Duraludons to that for one prize card, making it a little bit slower for his game plan, or if it's going to force him to evolve straight into those Archelodons early. Generally, I think most players will just take the prize and the knockout on their end. However, if there's a situation where he is feeling a little bit like he's not going to be able to keep the tempo up, he might actually elect to evolve early.
Yeah, especially if it's... So one thing that is important, though, if you're going to evolve early, is that you are weak to fire type. So while the Charizard EX isn't fire, at some point we could come through with a Radiant Charizard and one-shot an extra Archaludon if it's just sitting on the bench waiting. Because when you attack with the Archaludon, it removes its weakness for the turn. So the active one wouldn't be a target for the Radiant Charizard, but an extra benched one could be.
It's really going to come down to Lucas's board management here in order to be able to keep him in a good spot. It looks like he did have the Night Stretcher to kind of set himself back up again. We're going to see the big bridge come out. He's going to accelerate 2 energy to it. And I'm going to guess he's probably got the attach for turn. This deck does play quite a bit of energy.
Yep, typically seeing about 9 to 10 energies in the deck, so going to be pretty consistently finding that attach for turn. Want to be able to find those, get them in the discard pile too. So Lucas will at least be able to respond here, not with the knockout, but at least with the swing. And then we'll get to see kind of what Will can do from there. Definitely not great to be on the back foot as Archaludon in this matchup. But at least we are playing the game here. Gonna have some options. This Charizard won't be one-shotting Archaludons for a while, so Will would have to use like the 3rd rare candy to go into Dusknoir if we wanted to knock out the Archaludon this turn.
Now in this position, one thing I actually might look into is potentially using that boss's orders to bring up that Pidgeot, and then threaten some damage to make it much easier for you to take a KO on their ability to search through their deck. You don't really want to take too many knockouts too quickly in this deck until you're feeling pretty set up, just because that Charizard can come right back around and then really just start wreaking a havoc on your board.
Oh, for sure.
What would you go for in this scenario? Are you thinking about just hitting the Charizard in the active?
I'm probably just going to be hitting the Charizard in the active this turn. I like going for the Pidgeot, but I think a better option might be to, go for like this Duskull here, because what this allows you to do is you take one prize card. So if you, for example, if you were going for this Rotom, it would be 2 prize cards and you'd be able to turn on Counter Catcher and Defiance Band, and that would not be super great for Lucas, but by going for the Duskull, you take 1 prize card. So now if the Charizard hits you, it'll hit you for 210, and then you can go for that Relicanth play, where you go Relicanth, use the second attack on the Duraludon, the little one, and you'd be hitting for 290 damage. So if you compare that then with a Gust, you can one-shot that Pidgeot on this following turn for Lucas here. So especially if we have a second boss's orders or a way to try to find it next turn with something like a second Pokegear, I really like the idea of what Lucas did, going for that Duskull, because the Duskull becomes very annoying in this matchup. And yeah, just saying that next turn I'm going to look to try and one-shot that Pidgeot if you hit my Archaludon for 210 damage this turn.
So it looks like Will's going to go ahead and Arven. He's probably going to grab that Forest Seal Stone. Looks like he's already eyed it up. It's at the front of the deck now. One other play that a lot of Charizard players do have access to is now with that Dusk Hole in the discard pile is access to Thornton. So later on in the game, on a subsequent turn, he could just go ahead and Thornton that Dusk Hole back, throw a rare candy on it, and that's going to put him right back in the game with being able to Dust Noir to take out either some of these little guys or even put damage on that Arcaladon if he feels like that's the biggest threat on the board.
Oh, for sure. Also, the Dusk Noir is super important for those closing turns. One of the other hard things that we haven't mentioned yet for the Archaladon in this matchup is the fact that Charizard can set up for those Briar turns at the very end of the game, whether that's taking 3 prize cards that turn or even 4. Something like playing the Dusk Noir, taking 1 prize card with it, and then so if, for example, say Lucas does go down to 3 prize cards this turn, if Will has benching this other Duskull, if we're able to find a turn where we can go Candy into Dusk Noir, use it to take 1 prize card on something like this Radiant Greninja, setting Lucas down to 2 prize cards, we can then play Briar, and since Lucas has taken 4 prize cards, the Charizard's going to hit for 300 damage, so it already one-shots the Archaladons. So if I'm Will here, I'm probably just starting to set up for that 4 prize Briar turn next turn, and just wanting Lucas to actually even take 2 prize cards this turn.
Now that's a very interesting play. I'm not used to seeing a lot of Charizard players set up the double Charizard, especially this early in the match. No damage on that first one too, so I'm curious to see what the game plan is here for that. I'm guessing maybe promoting that first one, taking a hit, and then maybe potentially Turoing to avoid that 2 prize loss there on the following turn.
Yeah, definitely interesting to see committing that 3rd candy already early in the game. Another important thing is that we now have 4 of our typical 5 energies on board. I'm guessing that Will does have access to that Turo, so there would be nothing like a Gust's lock here for Lucas, but it's definitely something to think about when you're committing that many energies to the board. It's going to be difficult if you do want to go into something like that Radiant Charizard as an attacker here. One line that Will could have looked for if Will wanted to play into that Briar turn this turn would have been to Pidgeot for the boss's orders rather than the Charmeleon there, and boss up something like the Radiant Greninja and taking 1 prize card that way, because Will does need to be at 4 prizes for the Briar turn next turn to be effective.
Ooh, and that's a bit unfortunate. Looks like Lucas didn't have any supporters in hand to really get that turn going a little faster. Looks like this Archaladon is probably going to go ahead and go down on this attack. That's going to put Will in a little bit better of the prize race here.
Yeah, Will definitely looking like they're in the driver's seat right now. Going to be able to easily go down to 3 prize cards here with just an attack straight onto the Archaladon. We could also look for the Candy Dusk Noir this turn, allowing us to take 3 prize cards this turn for sure, by popping something on the bench or just using it on the active itself. Or we could even look for something like the Turo this turn to reset that Charizard and make it even harder for Lucas to find those last 5 prize cards.
I really think Lucas here was looking for that boss's orders to bring that Pidgeot up with the Relicanth attack, but usually that's really hard to do with this deck when you don't have a draw engine available. Now you do have that Radiant Greninja, but otherwise you're generally relying on Professor's Research to help you draw into cards and be able to get that tempo going back up in your hand there.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, with just that Greninja on board as your draw engine, Archaladon definitely lives and dies by whether or not you can find your supporters turn after turn. So we see things like those Pokegears coming in to be useful. We can see like heavier counts of just supporters than you'd see in decks like Charizard, who's playing a little bit of a thinner line of supporters compared to the heavy supporter line that you're going to see out of this Archaladon. Interestingly as well, here we see the Dialga V-Star come up into the active. I actually kind of like this because Lucas has only taken 2 prizes. This Charizard is only going to be able to hit for 240 right now. Yeah, so this only going to be able to do 240 onto this Dialga V-Star. So This Dialga V-Star can absorb a hit here. And it will give Lucas actually an opportunity to go for game next turn, potentially. With only 4 prizes left. It's going to take a lot, but we do have a line. Yep, there should be damage counters on that Charizard EX. We're going to send Alex over there just to make sure that those damage counters don't get lost. But this does open up a line for Lucas with something like the Pheasantipity, if we can use 2 Archaludons here, and something like a Counter Catcher, and a Boss in conjunction for back-to-back turns. We'd be able to take those last 4 prize cards with Star Chronos, taking 2 first onto something like the Charizard or the Rotom, and then being able to take the last 2 onto either the other one with the Gust or that Pidgeot if we had 1 more attached for turn onto the Dialga V-Star. Because then it would be able to do 280 and one-shot that Pidgeot. But Will going with this play here rather than something like the Turo play opens up the opportunity for Lucas to do something like that. Now, if I was Will, another line that I could have looked for was instead of using that Dusknoir on the active, we could have used that Dusknoir on something like the bench Duraludon to guarantee that we take 3 prize cards this turn and removing a Duraludon from the board. So it's harder for Lucas to get that Star Chronos response on this turn. But again, as we saw last turn, Lucas didn't have a supporter to play, so could be looking at a pretty weak hand. But the Pheasantipity draws, finding the Lumineon, definitely going to help try to smooth that out here.
My guess is he's probably going to be looking for a Professor's Research. Unfortunately, in the situation that he's in right now, he's kind of in a bit of a rough spot in order to be able to try and do something like do that Star Chronos to be able to get himself back in the game. He was probably hoping to be able to get that Star Chronos live and potentially boss's orders up something like that Rotom to be able to take 2 prizes and then maybe even take an additional 2 to clear this game out here. Now having to rely on something like boss or Professor's Research to get him back in the game, it's going to put him in a bit of a rough situation. So my guess here is he's either going to look to draw into the ability to get this Dialga maybe off the board to prevent another 2 prize loss. It looks like he's going to go for that Turos. So my guess is he'll probably go ahead and, in my opinion, he'd probably want to promote that Radiant Greninja up to the active after Turosing up this Dialga V-Star.
Yeah, and importantly enough, it looks like Lucas does not play any counter catchers in his list today. So the only Gust available is going to be off that boss's orders. So yeah, unless we had access to those Archaludons already in the hand, we'll not be able to go for something like...
Ooh, or he's going to go a little bit more aggressive with that Turos.
The counter catcher and a research to find all of them. But it looks like we are able to get the Star Chronos set up this turn. The question is just going to come down to, is it enough? So we can use the Star Chronos this turn and we can KO this Charizard, but then the next problem is that we're at 2 prize cards and we are just a Briar away from losing the game. A Briar and a Super Rod and a Charizard EX, I should say. From Will's side here. We'll have to see what this next turn brings in. So we did go ahead and go forward with that Star Chronos. Doing 220 to this Charizard now.
Now this does give him the opportunity to utilize that Pheasantipity again too, because Pheasantipity's worded as if a knockout was done the previous during your opponent's turn, then you'll be able to draw 3 cards. Since he's Star Chronos, that knockout still applies to this turn, so he could draw an additional 3 cards. I wonder if he does know about that.
Yeah, I imagine he should. I know that Lucas has played this deck a decent amount of times now at this point. Been bringing it to some locals here more recently. So we'll see. Should be seeing the Pheasantipity draws happen again this turn. It'll be interesting to see what we do with the rest of the turn. If we try to find something like that boss's orders, which we can see as the first card off that Pheasantipity, if we want to maybe go attach for turn onto this Dialga, boss the Pidgeot, and then hit the Pidgeot for 280, and try to make it harder for Will to have that knockout this turn for game.
Now, Tanner, you did play a very interesting build of Archelodon while you were at the regional. Something that you played was the Dusknoir line itself, which I'm guessing in this scenario would have been very beneficial for you to just clear this game out right now.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. The Dusknoir, well, you lose a little bit of consistency by playing the Dusknoir line. Like, I wasn't able to play things like the Relicanth, wasn't able to play 2 Turos like lists usually are for this deck. Playing, just a thin 1/1/1 line of the Dusknoir opens up a lot of opportunities for you to find lines to close out the game, especially in conjunction with Star Chronos and things like Thornton. Just being able to take 4 prize turns at the end of the game became a lot easier when you played the Dusknoir. But Lucas does not have access to that, but it is definitely something that helped this matchup specifically a lot from my gameplay. I played 2 Charizards in San Antonio. I went 3-1 in individual games against them. And yeah, Dusknoir and Star Chronos together was a big part of why I was able to win more games than I lost against this deck. Even though in all of the games it felt like a big uphill battle to win them. It took a lot more for me than it did for them to win the games. We are able to see the Scoop Up Cyclone to reset the V-Star. But the problem is still going to be, especially with that research, we have to find a knockout this turn. We'd have it with like something like a Night Stretcher, or just finding one. So we're able to do that. But the problem still persists that there's going to be a Pidgeot on the board, and we just need a Briar and a knockout on Will's side to take the game.
Now, do you think that bundle that he had in his hand could have potentially been useful into maybe having Will bring up that 1 prizer, just to make it a little bit harder for him to get that Briar for game next turn?
It definitely could have, but the bigger question then still becomes, how does Lucas close out the game? Because if Lucas only takes 1 prize card and goes down to 3 prizes, Will is still able to just take a knockout onto something on Lucas's board. With just Pidgeot for like boss's orders, and go down to 1 prize
I did
then.
forget about that Pidgeot. That quick search ability is probably one of the best abilities that has been printed in the game.
Mm-hmm. Very, very strong since it got reprinted here, and just does so much for this deck to help it smooth over that consistency.
Now, when we get Journey together, I will definitely be building a fun little deck using that quick search ability with Mamoswine EX. Deck's going to utilize a lot of Stage 2 Pokemon, and Mamoswine also lets you search for Pokemon. So it's going to be a fun little deck. Don't think it's going to be too good, but I think it's going to be a fun deck to play at our local tournaments.
Yeah, and you never know either, especially when you start to get Pidgeot online. It can make a lot of bad decks into decent decks once you once you're able to just pick any 1 card out of your deck every single turn. It can help smooth over decks that otherwise would not be nearly as powerful.
Well, he definitely hits for a good bit. I think it's 180 plus 40 for each Stage 2, and then it's got 340 HP. So it is a bit hard to take down as well. But we'll kind of have to wait and see when rotation happens here, which I believe is in March, correct?
Yep, it'll be that 2 weeks after Journeys Together comes out. Will be that first date where all of your yellow border cards are no longer legal, and all of those Journey Together cards are.
Looks like Will went ahead and played a Roxanne here.
Mm-hmm. So it looks like we're not playing for that Briar this turn, with especially seeing that Radiant Charizard come down with the attach for turn, kind of signaling that we weren't going to be going for that play this turn. But especially with the Roxanne, going to signal that we do not have the game this turn from Will's side here. Just missing too many pieces, would have needed Briar, Super Rod, and a way to find that Charizard EX. With the early evolve that we had previously. Yep, and here's our perfect instance of Metal Defender coming up to remove the weakness on it. So this Charizard only going to hit for 250 here.
Now that's a very unfortunate turn for Will there. Being able to keep that Archelodon alive for another turn makes it a lot harder for him to be able to necessarily close this out next turn without that Briar play. It gives Lucas an opportunity to potentially come back into this if he's able to get to a boss's orders I'm not sure if all 4 are in the discard pile yet, but if they are not, unless he's playing 3, I think
we are playing 3. Yes. So
there-
it looks like we're playing 3. We know at least 2 are in the discard pile.
when I did
We
see
are down
one,
the scoop up Cyclone, so we can't reset that Luminion.
so he's
but
got the
we do
PAL
at least have a
pad.
PAL pad here.
So he's gotta draw into this boss's orders if he wants to be able to clean this game out right now.
And
Otherwise, it is a good opportunity for Will to be able to come right back in this game and potentially Briar for a game.
I'm going to be interested to see what tools Lucas has to try to find this boss's orders. With Will not taking a knockout this turn, Pheasantipity is not going to be something that we have access to. With the Scoop Up Cyclone down, we can't use that to reset the Luminion to just go grab the boss's orders. And with especially that research from last turn, we saw a lot of the energies that we had left in the deck going into the discard pile. So I wonder as well if there's any way to even draw cards with this Radiant Greninja. Or if we have one more Pokegear that we can use to try to search through this deck. It looks like the deck's around 10 to 13-ish cards, so not guaranteed off of the gear if we have it, but not a bad option. Pretty good hand, honestly, off of the Roxanne for Lucas, being able to have that PAL pad and the Iono. Looks like we're not going to be able to have game this turn, though, but can at least go ahead and draw some new cards and just wait.
A lot of people around here locally do like to say that Roxanne and Iono are not real cards. The running joke is every time people shuffle back in and draw, it always tends to be nothing but the cards your opponent needed to win the game. So
Exactly.
we'll have to wait and see how this Iono fared out for Will here. Looks like Lucas went ahead and passed turn and hopes that maybe he'll be able to maintain this Archelodon for a turn, depending on if Will's going to be able to get it out of the active or not for this Radiant Charizard.
Especially if that Radiant Charizard not able to attack again, since it attacked last turn, will have to use that Professor's Turos scenario if they want to take an attack this turn. And with having to use the Turos this turn, that means that Will cannot use a Briar to end the game. So Lucas is guaranteed to have at least one more turn here to try to end the game. But if Will is off of this Iono able to string together that Super Rod, evolve a new Charizard, and retreat the active, or if we're able to just Turo up the active, take a knockout on our Chaladon, then Lucas would have to rely on something like a Thornton to even have an attack next turn. Since there are no Duraludons on the bench, no way to power up another attacker. And if we're using a Thornton, that means we are not using a boss's orders to bring up one of those 2 prizers that we need to knock out to finish the game.
Yeah, I think Lucas's game plan for this turn in order to win is hope that this is going to be a staring contest for the turn to be able to keep that Archelodon alive, because otherwise it's going to be looking pretty grim being able to come back into this game.
Yeah, using that Iono along with not taking a knockout, not only does it stop the free pivot from Will's side, it also means that Will cannot use Pheasantipity to try to draw some extra cards after this Iono, making it even harder for Will to try to piece together that perfect turn. There is still a world that Will could take the game this turn, but it's going to take a lot of pieces. You can, in theory, do something like Super Rod in 3 energies. If you can find that Night Stretcher for the Charizard EX, you'd be able to evolve that Charmeleon into the Charizard, attach 2 to the active Charizard and 1 to the Charizard EX, manually retreat it, and then if you can somehow, after that, find 1 more energy to attach to the EX and Briar, you could get the 3 prize turn this turn. But especially off the back of an Iono, with no access to Forest Seal Stone, just a quick search, no Pheasantipity draws, that's probably going to be an insurmountable task this turn.
Definitely a big ask. It is possible. We've definitely seen games in the past come down to some of the most impossible, or improbable would be a better word, plays for it. But I have seen people do some of the craziest plays, especially when their backs are against the wall. Now, it's just going to kind of come down to Will's luck here if he ended up having the cards he needed to be able to seal this game out. Otherwise, we are probably going to be looking into a bit of a slower turn here, potentially setting up for a KO next turn as long as Lucas doesn't get to that last boss's orders.
So it looks like we're going to play the Arven this turn for that Super Rod, that important Super Rod that we need since there are no energies left in the deck here. So we can try to do something again next turn. Again, still not seeing the Turo, so there will be no attack this turn from Will. Will's once again going to be opting into this kind of stalemate staring contest of like, all right, who can find the pieces that they need first? Will Lucas be able to find that boss's orders before Will can find the last card that they need?
Well, it looks like he does have an energy in hand, so as long as he has the energy available, he'll be able to potentially retreat this Radiant... Oh, Counter Catcher.
I'm going to bring up a Counter Catcher to stall here. Even better, now Lucas needs a way to move this Archaladon and gust something in the same turn, which he does not have access to in his deck. With the Scoop Up Cyclone being down, would have to use Turos and Boss's orders in the same turn, which you cannot do. So once again, Lucas would need 2 turns to find the game here.
I couldn't tell, but I think that might have been a pass.
I think so too. I believe shuffling up and then probably just going to be passing here. So Charizard, the Radiant Charizard cannot attack this turn. Just leaving that one prizer active, and just saying, Lucas, do you have a way to move this Archaladon? So we have the boss's orders here from Lucas. Is going to pass. So now all Will needs is an energy. So I don't believe there's one in the deck.
Fire in hand.
There should not be one in the deck. There were 4 in the discard pile and 1 on the Radiant Charizard. So unless Will is playing 6 energies, but I believe that they are playing 5, they would not be able to do it inherently. But if they had something like that Night Stretcher, they could get that last one. The Turo will be enough though as well here to just Turo, knock out, take 2 prize cards. And now this does give Will one more turn though.
Well, Lucas has the opportunity to slap Relicanth down now. And be able to take this game.
Yep. If Lucas can find either a Relicanth or one more boss,
looks like that's an Ultra Ball.
Let's see if Lucas has access to the Relicanth this game. So if he does, that Relicanth 250 on the Archaladon already would be able to do 330, which is just enough to take the knockout here.
Looks like he's checking his discard pile, checking his hand.
Has it in his list.
Now it comes down to if that's in the prize cards or not.
So we see the Ultra Ball. Is the Relicanth in those last 8 cards in the deck, or is it one of the 2 prizes?
It looks like it might be one of those 2 prizes. I'm guessing if he would have had it in the deck, he would have grabbed it and placed it down with the quickness.
I imagine it would be slammed down immediately. Yep, Lucas calling it. Gonna probably flip over and show that Relicanth here. But now there we go. And we're going to tie it up 1-1. Gardevoir down for Lucas and Charizard down for Will here.
We got a tie game on our hands right now.
Tied up 1-1 here. We got a little bit of excitement now. Get the back and forth.
Looks like Will's eyeing up Guardy for this matchup.
Yep. I have confirmation that Will be going for Guardy, and it looks like Lucas is staying on that Archaladon here. Get this updated here just to reflect it. Yep.
Now, when you did your Conquest matches, were you big on switching decks between rounds, or did you like to stick with the one that you played before?
It kind of depended. I would switch it up, try to be not do the same thing every time.
That's kind of what I did too.
Sometimes I would, so my approach was I would usually start with the deck that I thought was going to be hardest to win a game with. And then after that, I would go into like a comfort deck. I would try to have a comfort deck waiting in second, or one that I thought would be easier for me to find a game with, and then close with the deck that was going to be the most universal, it's going to have the best matchup spread across the board. So something that I was okay with trying to find a win against anything. That was kind of my approach. So it kind of would depend on how I was feeling from game one, if I wanted to switch over between the two decks, or if I would just keep going with that deck that I thought was already going to be the hardest to take a game with, so just give myself more games with that deck to try to find that win. Or if I thought I could maybe find the win later.
Now it looks like here, since we got Archelodon versus Gardevoir, this is going to be a match you will probably see quite a bit in this new format with Badoo around. However, they do not have for this. We did decide that this Conquest tournament was going to be played in the same format that we started with. How do you feel about this matchup? I feel like it might be a little bit more favored into Guardy overall.
I definitely think it's a little bit more Guardy favored from playing it as well. I went 4-2 in the matchup 4-2 in the matchup in San Antonio, but kind of like Charizard, they were very, very tough wins that I had to fight for a lot. I think this matchup is better for Archelodon than the Charizard matchup is, for Archelodon, but it is still very close. Playing things like the Jamming Towers definitely helped the matchup a lot. Makes it a little bit more Archelodon favored. You're able to find more of those 2 prize turns, just because they do have to commit those Bravery Charms usually to take a knockout onto your big arches. So being able to play down something like the Jamming Tower, or playing a Counter Catcher or something first, then playing it down to take 2 prizes in one turn, whether that's taking out like a Curlia and a Drifloon in one turn, can definitely get you some extra prizes and can make the matchup a little bit more manageable.
Now, I feel like Lucas in this scenario might have been better off holding that Jamming Tower for a little bit longer. This is going to give Will an opportunity to potentially bump that stadium, and he's generally not going to use his tools right off the bat, except for maybe TM Evo. So it's kind of a bit of a 50-50 gamble. You just have to kind of figure out if he's going to go ahead and put something like an Artisan or maybe a Moonlight Hill down. I actually don't have access to the deck list, but I'm sure Tanner will let me know here in a second or two. It's kind of like this little game you have to play if you think that them getting the Curlias up is and stopping that's going to be better for you in the long run, or if you want to try and save those Jamming Towers to knock out those attackers when they have damage on them.
Yeah, it definitely feels like this matchup can become a bit of a stadium war. So do you want to use that stadium first and protect it from being Iono'd out of your hand, or do you want to save it as a response so you can try to win that stadium war in the end?
It's a bit of a mind game.
Yeah, it looks like Will is playing 2 stadiums in their deck. They're playing 1 Moonlit Hill and 1 Artisan. So you see how many of these Jamming Towers Lucas is playing. But if it's only 2, then right now Will would win that stadium war eventually. So it's just going to come down to how disruptive is this first Jamming Tower? Is it able to stop one of those early knockouts from coming through for the side of Gardevoir if Will can't find the bump for it? And how much value can we get out of the second Jamming Tower if Lucas does play it?
Well, it does look like Will went ahead and used an Earthen Vessel to discard that TM Evo there. So he's probably going to opt to take it a little bit slower here, but it's not the end of the world for him against this matchup, because generally this deck, for the most part, is only going to be taking 1 prize per turn in this matchup. So as long as Will plays a bit conservatively and makes sure to keep his board somewhat wide with 1 prizers, he should be fine working his way into getting to that Gardevoir. He just has to make sure that he takes it just slow enough to where it's not a problem, but fast enough to where he's not getting outpaced by those attacks from those Archelodons.
Exactly. If you're the Archelodon player here, you definitely would have preferred to lead the Duraludon, just wanting to try and go fast, go first, and just start swinging on turn 2, just because you do have to take those one prize turns most of the time, especially early until the Gardevoir starts to take knockouts with that Drifloon. One important thing that you can also do in this matchup as the Archaludon is when they put damage counters on things like the Drifloon or like the Screamtail, you can just take a knockout with Duraludon's first attack, hammer in for 30. So being able to just hammer in for 30 and take knockouts is very convenient at times in this matchup. It can make it so your Gardevoir opponent also just has to take one prize knockouts if you don't bench one of those 2 prize liabilities that they can try and bring up and punish.
Looks like Lucas is going to try and take a bit of an aggressive approach here. That Tempting Trap did actually keep that Greninja from being able to retreat this turn, so he went ahead and utilized that Scoop Up Cyclone. I think he decided he was going to do that because he was going to research his hand away, so might as well go ahead and get that Radiant Greninja out of the active so he can at least do some damage if he can't get to that Archaludon.
Exactly. Still wanting to try to find that Archaludon here would be the perfect turn 2 for Lucas, just to try and start taking those knockouts. Would like to also find a third Duraludon here, just to potentially threaten something like that Star Chronos next turn. Lucas benching the Dialga V early rather than leaving it for a Thornton play means that it's going to be a liability, but it is also going to be an active threat throughout this game if Will is not able to target it down, either with something like a Counter Catcher or like a Screamtail to knock it out.
And that Screamtail is going to probably come in quite a bit of handy here in this matchup too, because generally, like we said before, Archaludon does for the most part like to just have that one EX on board and primarily just wants to keep one on board while looping it around to avoid being able to get bossed and knocked out on the other one. So that Screamtail does give Will that opportunity to be able to take a knockout on the bench without having to commit any sort of boss's orders to bring something up into the active.
Exactly. If you can start taking those knockouts on the bench without committing those bosses or those counter catchers, you can save them for late when you need to close. When you want to just close with something like, say, if Lucas were to bench like a Pheasantipity, you could use your counter catcher to bring that up and knock it out with like a Gardevoir EX in conjunction with a Monkey Dory to move some extra damage counters onto it. It looks like Lucas is going to be able to find that turn 2 attack here, going to be able to get started. Will opting for the Tempting Trap instead of the TM Evolution could turn out to be problems.
Well, he couldn't because of the Jamming Tower.
Oh yes, the Jamming Tower coming in play. Not having the bump for that Jamming Tower actually did end up mattering. So Lucas using that Jamming Tower, taking the gamble of going first in the Stadium War paid off. Will wasn't able to have the replacement for it in hand from that opening hand.
And he did get that Nest Ball to set up that next Duraludon there too. We might potentially see a chance of a Dialga V-Star coming up next turn depending on how this next turn turns out.
Oh, for sure. Gonna still need a little bit of some pieces to make it happen, but it's definitely possible. Looks like they're calling for a judge call here, so I will be right back.
Now we'll just have to wait and see what this judge calls for. Not exactly sure what's going on. Tanner does have an ear in on the game while it's going, so he can keep track of anything that's being said that might be of importance. As for me, I'm just kind of here making sure that we got somebody to talk, as well as Tanner, so he's not sitting in here talking by himself. Looks like it might have been something to do with the prize cards. Not 100% sure though. I'll wait until Tanner gets back for confirmation on that.
So what happened was Lucas accidentally took 2 prize cards instead of 1 off of that first knockout. By the books, that would typically result in a DPL, a double prize loss on the side of Lucas, meaning that Will only has to take 4 prizes to win the game. There is, however, precedent to de-escalate depending on the scenario. Something like at a league challenge or earlier on in a cup, I have in the past de-escalated it just to a warning, but later on in a cup or at a major, or I would call that a DPL. So I asked the players, left it up to them of how strictly we wanted to be judging this, since it is more of a fun, casual thing, and they decided they wanted to keep it judged more strictly, since it is the grand finals of a long tournament that everyone played in. So we ruled it as a double prize penalty to Lucas, so Will only has to take 4 prizes to win this game.
That's going to be a very large advantage for Will here. That means he's only going to need to take 2 knockouts on this, these EX or V Pokemon in order to be able to win. And with this deck, as long as he's able to get that jamming tower off the board, that's going to be a lot easier for him, more than likely on the following turn, because I don't believe that Will is playing the Speedy Guardy version in order to be able to rare Candy into Gardevoir.
We are not playing the Speedy Guardy, not playing Candy, not playing Secret Box, just your traditional slower Guardy. So going to take a little bit longer to start evolving up. So this extra 2 prizes that Will does not have to take definitely going to come into play here in this matchup, especially since Lucas was able to start going pretty fast here to start, and is ready to threaten that turn 3 Star Chronos.
It does look like he has the Unfair Stamp in hand, which is huge for this matchup. That's going to bring Archelodon down 2 cards and put Will in a very favorable position in order to be able to set up for a knockout next turn.
Yeah, especially with no draw engine on board besides this Radiant Greninja. Unfair Stamp, very punishing for this deck, especially when you look at it and see that Will is not going to take a prize card this turn. This is just another waiting turn for Will, with no Gardevoir EX up on the board. So Lucas wouldn't be able to even find something like that Fezandipity as an out to drawing extra cards this turn.
And another thing, if Will were to find a counter catcher, he could potentially put Lucas in a situation where he won't even be able to take an attack next turn.
Not without finding something like an Evolve on a Duraludon and an Attach. If we brought up the Dialga V-Star, we could find an attack pretty easily with just Evolve Attach. Same with if we found an Archaludon EX. If we bring up the Radiant Greninja, it would just take an Attach by itself. But having to have Lucas find those 2 pieces off of a 3-card hand with the 2 from Unfair Stamp and a draw for turn is still a lot to ask for Lucas, especially if one of the pieces you need is an energy to attach for turn. Would not be able to commit that energy to concealed cards to try to find extra cards.
Well, and it's looking a little bit rougher to try and find energy because it looks like he's got 3 attached and 2 in the discard already. So that's going to leave him with, is he playing 9 or 10 for this list?
Let me check here. I believe it is 9 that we're playing in this list.
So if he's playing 9, he's only has access to potentially 4 more energy in the deck. So in order to see that off of 3 cards with so much of the deck left is very, very low on the percentages. However, it does look like he did get the Night Stretcher to be able to use Greninja to try and draw his way back into this. Looks like the other card he drew off a stamp was Boss's Orders. It looks like he had another Boss's Orders in hand too. So he's going to go ahead and take that knockout on the Kirlia.
Yeah, we are going to get the knockout on the Kirlia. One thing of note was Lucas. One thing of note was the fact that Will decided to use Fade Out with the Spiritomb. Instead of potentially doing something like just retreating into the Manaphy, means that Lucas could have had Lumineon V as an out to being able to draw extra cards this turn by taking the Spiritomb out of play. But
chat, don't worry, we have somebody with ears in on the table, so they are able to actually hear the table as they play.
Yep. Don't worry, Michael, we read the chat. We just don't have a way to type back to the chat at the moment. But yep, as soon as the judge call happened over at the table, we heard it and were able to go in and interfere. Same with the damage counters from last game and the deck issue from game 1.
Bit of a wild beginning of this tournament, but I'm sure there's a lot of nerves right now. These players have been playing quite a bit of games and played through a lot of very powerful opponents. I'm sure that these guys might just be a little bit nervous in this matchup, especially for Will, because he's got to be able to win 2 sets in order to bring this back around.
Mm-hmm, exactly. Needing to win the best of 5 here and then win a bracket reset as well to take down the tournament. I know that they're definitely wanting to at least get that bracket reset, bring it to a bracket reset grand finals would be very exciting for them. And it's definitely something that I want to see as well. I think it would be interesting to go all the distance, get every single possible round out of this tournament as we could. So we'll have to see here how this game plays out. Will definitely in the driver's seat right now. Having only 1 Kirlia is going to be a little bit disruptive to their setup, but at least we're able to find the Buddy Pop in here, so we can find 2 more Ralts for next turn. And we might just be looking to, if we can, just attack with a Gardevoir EX this turn, just to start getting some damage on the board.
Now, did you see a Gardevoir in the hand? I was not looking very closely.
I have not seen one yet, no. So we might be stuck here with this Kirlia, which, if we can't move this Kirlia, if we can't evolve it, would be catastrophic for Will, considering that we would have no Kirlias on the board next turn when Lucas knocks this one out, so we would be taking yet another turn off from attacking. Lucas could go down to 2 prize cards before Will takes their first attack.
Well, it looks like he does have the Gardevoir and the Screamtail, so this could actually end up being a pretty strong turn for him. I'm wondering if Will might have that counter catcher in hand to maybe bring up that Dialga to maybe stall out a little bit and then just start picking at the bench on these little guys. Because if he takes out that Duraludon, it's going to make it much harder for him to be able to do something like power up this Dialga V to be able to do a V-Star attack.
Oh, for sure. Even without having the counter catcher, just disrupting either the draw from Greninja, considering that Lucas didn't do much on that last turn after the unfair stamp, or going for the Duraludon to try and deny the Star Chronos turn, is still going to do a decent amount here and help Will get back into this game.
And keep in mind, Will does only need 3 more prize cards to take this game because of the double prize loss there.
So if we're able to just Screamtail 1 more of those Duraludons next turn, recycle that Screamtail and reuse it, and then go into a knockout with Drifloon onto this Archaludon, or finding a knockout onto that Dialga V on the bench, Will would be able to take this game and go into game 4 with a 2-1 lead on match point.
I'm wondering if Will is going to be able to get access to his stadiums here soon, because being able to use that Bravery Charm to knock out this Archaludon is going to be very important, especially to be able to take 2 more prizes.
Exactly, especially if we want to take those Duraludons out at all, we're going to have to find that bump.
And it looks
alongside that.
It looks like Lucas went ahead and opted to research there, and it did look like one of those jamming towers was in the discard pile too. So if he makes that bump, it's going to make it much harder for Lucas to be able to stop these attacks from coming in.
Lucas would have no more ways of disrupting the tools, would not have a way to take those 2 prize turns by going with a jamming tower to take 1 and then swinging with something like that Archaludon to take the second one.
It does look like he got another Earthen Vessel, help him deck thin a little bit. One important thing with this deck is trying to get those energies out, so when you do get the opportunity to draw, you're drawing a lot more powerful cards. I'm wondering if maybe there is a potential Fezandipity play. Doesn't look like it because he's shuffling up his deck. A Fez would have been pretty powerful here though too, to be able to help him draw into being able to potentially either Star Chronos or even just be ready to set up yet another Archaludon for the future here.
Oh, for sure. Lucas's deck looking nice and thin now, exactly how you like it. If you're If you are the Archaladon player, especially against this Scardy matchup where they're going to be trying to disrupt you with Ionos, you want to make sure your deck is nice and thin and consistent for when you're having to draw cards to close out the game at the end here.
In terms of thinning for your deck, it feels very similar to Lost Box, where you want to keep nothing but your power cards in there, so if there is any hand disruptions, it is nothing but gas the entire way.
So we see the first Archaladon coming down. I'm curious if this is signaling that we have the Star Chronos this turn, or if we're just setting up for it next turn, getting that evolution off now and attaching before something like an Iono comes down from Will's side. I've done both in the past myself. Yep, so it looks like Lucas is just setting up, making it a little bit easier for himself to next turn find that Star Chronos off of the back of something like an Iono here.
Now this does feel a little bit scary for Lucas though, because that does put a bit of a liability with that Archaladon on board. However, he does play things like Turos, and I believe the scoop up is out of the way now, so he's going to be looking for Turos to be able to get that back up. But if he does not have it, or if his hand gets disrupted, all it will take is one counter catcher, and he could potentially be stuck for a turn or two.
Exactly, yeah. Not being able to move that Archaladon is going to be very, very annoying for Lucas, since we had to commit that Scoop Up Cyclone on turn 2 to move that Greninja after the Mawile attack came through. We do at least play 2 Turos in the deck, but finding them is still going to be a tall task here.
It looks like the Pal Pad hasn't been used yet either. I didn't see it in his discards when he was going through his research, so that will give him access to be able to utilize those cards again too if he needs them in the future.
Exactly, is going to be able to reuse things like an extra Turo or an extra Boss's Orders here just to find those last few pieces that he might need to close the game. Right now could even be potentially threatening game next turn if Lucas is able to string together the perfect turn. In a world where this Dialga doesn't get knocked out this turn by Will, we could look for something like that Star Chronos onto a single prizer, into then attaching another energy to the Dialga to do 280 to knock out a Gardevoir EX. It's all just going to depend on how many damage counters are left on this Gardevoir EX, though, when Will passes the turn back over to Lucas.
I think Will's best case scenario here is finding that Stadium Bump and getting that Dialga V up into the active, preventing that Star Chronos from happening without the potential intervention of a Thornton.
And even if we take out the Dialga V, even with a Thornton, we would not be able to get all 5 energies onto this Dialga in one turn, given that Lucas only has 1 Duraludon on the bench right now. Cannot Thornton out a second Duraludon and that Dialga V. So this is definitely a turn that I would have liked to see, and I'm sure Lucas would have appreciated having either a second Dialga V on the bench or a third Duraludon to bench there.
How does DPLs work with Iono? Do they still just draw?
They still just draw the red mark.
Okay.
So let's see here.
He did get the Stadium Bump, and he does have that Drifloon available. So there is a possibility he might end up just retreating this Gardevoir and hitting this Archaladon.
Yeah. We have the knockout onto the Archaladon for sure for the side of Gardevoir. It's just going to be a question of, do we have that Gust?
Yep, and there's the counter catcher.
Huge counter catcher here for Will. Going to make it so Will only has to take 1 more prize card next turn, which is going to be a lot easier to do with this Dialga out of the way here, meaning that Lucas will not have the potential to go for a Star Chronos turn to take a prize card, for example, on this Drifloon, and then to take it onto the Gardevoir EX. And especially if, now that we know that the second Jamming Tower is gone, not being able to take out Knockout with Jamming Tower here makes it even harder, because there is a world where Lucas could have gone Jamming Tower to take 1 prize, gone down to 2, and then gone Star Chronos for the last 2 between the 2 turns.
This is looking pretty grim for Lucas this game. It looks like all Will needs is either a Gust to take out one of these single prizers with his Gardevoir, or a way to put something like this Drifloom or a Screamtail onto the board to win.
Yeah, and even without the DPL, this is looking like it's going to start swinging back into Will's favor. If Will had to take all 6 prize cards, It's looking more and more likely that Lucas might be stalled out at 1 prize card anyways here. Just with the nature of the back and forth of these 2 decks, much easier for the Gardevoir to take 3 prize cards in 2 turns than the Duraludon, especially without any more access to jamming towers, without access to a Lost Vacuum here to take the extra one, and without a way to take a 1-turn knockout onto the Gardevoir EX. All that's left really is for Will to Turo up that Gardevoir on the next turn, and that would be all but game, even in a world where there was not a double prize loss penalty this turn.
And it can be very hard for Archelodon to be able to push their way out of some of these grind games when they have to rely on some of these 2-prizer liabilities in order to be able to get themselves back in. So something like this Pheasantipity, although you do get the draw here, it could definitely end up being something that could bite you in the butt in the future here, especially because decks like Gardevoir can really take advantage of these lower HP prize Pokemon to be able to take easy 2-prize turns.
Exactly, especially with the ability to snipe with things like the Scream Tail, or even just to bring it up with a counter catcher, letting you knock it out without having to commit a Bravery Charm to one of your single prizers through the use of Monkey Dory and Gardevoir EX. Those 2 prizers become so much more of a liability in this matchup. It almost feels like Archelodon goes from being a walling deck that wants to just kind of be big and hard to knock out to having to be a fast racing deck in matchups like this one, the matchup with Charizard, where you just need to go, go, go and hope you can take those 6 prize cards one at a time before they inevitably come back by taking 2 prize cards 3 turns in a row.
Now, I know a lot of people do say that this deck does feel very similar to like decks like Raging Bolt, where you're sitting on a relatively large guy who can hit for a good amount of damage. It does definitely play a bit differently. However, sometimes it does feel like the gameplay is very low to the floor in some matchups, like with what Raging Bolt was doing in the past.
Oh, for sure. Definitely has a nice, simple game plan. And especially it feels a lot like those Raging Bolt decks when they used to play more of the Bravery Charms and were just big, annoying.
Yeah, the 4 Bravery Charm Raging Bolts.
HP Raging Bolts in the active that are just one-shotting everything and trying to turbo out those early prize cards going second. Smart move by Lucas taking that Greninja out of play, saying, Will, you have to KO a 2 prizer this turn. You do not get to Scream Tail or just gust up my Greninja with your Gardevoir to take the game. You have to knock out one of these 2 prizers. You have to either find that Monkey Dory to deal with the Pheasantipity, or you have to find the ability to use Drifloon again.
If he has the Super Rod, there's the Night Stretcher too. Looks like that's going to be the game there. He'll be able to get all that energy on the Drifloon after retreating the Gardevoir and taking that 300 damage knockout there.
Yep. Get those 5 energies on to the Drifloon for game. And yeah, so Will take us to game 4 with match point in hand. And we know now that Will is going to be going back to Lost Zone Pikachu, as it's the only deck that they have yet to win a game with.
Now, Lost Zone is one of those decks that I feel like is actually quite a bit favored into this Archelodon, especially with the Pikachu. Lucas does not have a way to be able to take a 1-turn KO on the Pikachu EX, so it's going to make it very, very beneficial for Will to be able to power up that Pikachu to take these 2 prize KOs with it. However, he can also keep the game pretty slow by only having 1 prize liabilities on the bench most of the game.
Yeah, this is where I'll come in and say that that's not as much of a problem if you're playing the Dusknoir line.
Yeah, the Dusknoir line definitely makes a big difference here.
The Lost Zone matchup becomes a lot better when you're playing the Dusknoir line because you don't have to worry as much about the Pikachu.
And this is one of the reasons why some players in Japan were even running that Staryu and Starmie line, just so they can put 2 damage counters on things, or Raging Bolt was still pretty popular there too, so it was allowing them to be able to take one turn knockout on those 240 HP Raging Bolts. Now, here in the US, it has not been as popular of an option. I think a lot of players have felt that it has felt like a better deck as more of like that walling kind of strategy, or playing it with the Dialga to be able to have a little bit more power in certain turns of the game to try and swing that tempo back in their favor.
Yeah, it's definitely been the more popular variant for sure over here in the West, for myself included.
My only gripe with the deck has been just cards to allow it to be able to dig a little bit faster without having to rely on Professor's Research. It is a very good card in this. Sometimes it feels like you really want to use some of those other power supporters in some of your turns, and it can put you in this situation where you kind of have to pick and choose your battles each turn to make sure that you can optimize your turn to the best of its capabilities.
Oh, for sure. So how do you feel about this next matchup here? So Lucas is switching over to the Cloth Terapagos here, especially without the Dusknoir, without that Starmie that you mentioned. Pretty difficult matchup for Archaludon. So Lucas going to go to the Cloth here first to try to force that.
Well,
force that game 5.
the Pikachu start's always a bit worrisome, because this just means that Lucas is going to actually start out with a very strong turn. He's got the Ancient Booster Energy Capsule as well, so what he's going to do is he is just going to get this poison started on this Pikachu, making it significantly easier for him to be able to take that knockout in the future, as well as all of these poison counters that go on the Pokemon do not actually count as knockouts, so this Pheasantipity will not be able to draw off of them as long as he does his math correctly with his attacks. This, in my opinion, is probably a lot more favored for Lucas here in this matchup, especially with the ability to do poison knockouts without allowing Will to be able to draw.
Exactly. Being able to use the poison knockouts to just say, I don't care about your Pikachu's ability, I will do 190 damage to it or more, and then let it die to poison. Definitely helps the matchup. And having just a natural way to deal with this Pikachu without having to play something like Canceling Cologne, without having to play something like a Dusknoir or that Starmie that you would need in the Archaludon deck to deal with this.
Cloth is also just known for going fast. Once you're set up, you just start going, and opening a way to get to that trolley right off the bat makes it significantly better for Lucas to be able to just really get in this driver's seat. Unfortunately, he's not going to be able to take a knockout right away this turn, but he will at least be able to set this Pikachu up for a future knockout and make it a lot harder for Will to be able to keep this prize trade going at a good enough pace.
Exactly. Having that guaranteed 8 damage counters here to start the game is just a lot of pressure onto Will.
Well,
it definitely, as much as opening the Pikachu is bad for Will, it's honestly it might be best case scenario. Well, maybe not best case scenario, but it's certainly better than if Will had opened something like a Comfey or a Sableye, because Lucas would just have the game right now.
Yeah, that would in fact be the game. And as much as we do enjoy seeing a Donk every now and then, I feel like in the Grand Finals here, I think we do want to still see some Pokemon being played. So at least we're getting that opportunity with this match.
Exactly. And Lucas is going to use that Forest Seal Stone early here just to grab that energy and just say, no matter what you do next turn, this Terapagos is going to be ready to swing.
And they like to hit for a lot of damage in this deck, especially with that poison.
Exactly. With that poison coming through, with that Sneasler, has the Binding Mochi already on the Terapagos as well. This is almost a perfect setup for Lucas. The only thing that could have made it better is if we had the Stadium out before Trolley, could have been able to grab a few extra Pokemon too. But other than that, pretty much perfect start here from the Cloth Terapagos deck here.
Now keep in mind, if Lucas does win this game, he is going to have to take his Archelodon deck back against Lost Box, which I think in that matchup is a lot more favored for Will here.
Oh, yeah. And it looks like, given the hand, we've seen the hand from Will having absolutely nothing. Lucas just threatening knockout on turn 2 just says, yeah, you've got it. Lucas was able to delay the inevitable here, having to play Archelodon versus that Lost Box deck, but is still going to have to find a way to win that matchup here in Game 5. So here we go. We get to go the distance here in this first best of 5 of our Grand Finals here.
Now this matchup is either going to be for all the marbles for Lucas, or it's going to be a bracket reset for Will, which can probably be a little bit demoralizing for Lucas and a little bit energizing for Will, but it really is going to come down to the determination of these players, and these guys have fought tooth and nail to get here, so I'm sure even with the nerves, they'll both play at the best of their capabilities if this bracket resets.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Both players just really wanting to find the win here. It's been, like we said, over 2 months of playing. About 7-8 rounds for Will, especially if they win the bracket reset. So a lot of games, a lot of good players that they had to go through. So Will definitely would like to see the bracket reset, get that chance to close out the game, to take the win. Will also would like us to know that they feel really stupid for their deck list error in Game 1. But like we kind of mentioned earlier, mistakes happen, especially when you're playing in a format that we haven't been playing in, switching cards around so much, right? Like, it's gonna happen, but that's why we're here. That's why we make sure everything is staying fair, responding to everything correctly.
And at the end of the day, when it comes to penalties and stuff, I think we've just kind of decided we really want the players to kind of have an agreement on things. That's why with the double prize loss that happened in the previous, now 2 games ago, we kind of left it up to the players to decide what they felt was appropriate for this tournament. We want them to make sure that they're having fun, but also kind of keeping it within the same guidelines between both players.
Exactly. We want to make sure that everyone understands and everything feels fair, especially to all the other players that have played so far in the tournament. So, especially to all the other players in the tournament, with this being the Grand Finals, just being fair to everyone, going into this with the game loss from the deck list error and that DPL, just being reflective of how much people have worked for this and how many games people have played and tried and like prepared and come up with decks to bring round after round.
Now I'm curious to see if this bracket does reset. I wonder if both players are going to take the same 3 decks or if they're going to switch it up a little bit.
Yeah, I am curious to see. I know my plan, of course, was to bring new decks, but that was my plan for every round. I'm curious what the 2 of them would decide. So we're getting into it. Will be going first in this matchup here. And leading the Dialga is not great for Lucas, but
we at least know it's not going down this turn. That is a Greninja going into the Lost Zone. Not as impactful as an attacker for this matchup, however, that is another card that allows you to get your draw power going in this matchup. And I think for this matchup, you kind of want to speed through a lot of your deck to get yourself to a point where your Pikachu can really just start hitting consistently every turn.
Exactly. While the Greninja isn't going to be the greatest attacker, it is such a vital consistency piece for the deck.
So Will must have grabbed something that was even more important for this matchup rather than the Greninja. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if it was potentially an energy that he wasn't sure if he needed or not.
I wonder if it was that energy that Will attached to the Comfy and didn't have another one in hand, so the choice was either grab Greninja and not be able to conceal cards this turn, or just grab the energy, guarantee that you have at least access to 1 grass energy in this matchup. Okay, so it looks like we did have another energy in hand. It might have been next to that Colress then, wanting that Colress for next turn.
It was either that or if it was the energy, he might have been a bit concerned since he has not had an opportunity to look through his deck. He didn't want to go ahead and Lost Zone an important energy that might also be prized.
Exactly, especially only playing 2 copies of the Lightning, only 2 copies of the Grass, and we saw that those were the 2 energies that Will has access to this turn. The Greninja next to either of those can be a hard choice, not knowing what's in the deck. There's also a world where it could have been the Pikachu that it was next to. In which case,
that's a good one
especially
too,
with
yeah.
how quickly Will decided to send that Greninja to the Lost Zone, I wonder if it was just the Pikachu. Just
It might have
easy
been the
decision
Pikachu.
to keep the Pikachu over the Greninja. Definitely a lot of cards next to that Greninja that you'd probably pick instead of the Greninja.
Now, Lucas opting to Turos that Dialga out of the active so he can hit for weakness on that Comfey. Keep in mind, it is weak to metal, so it's going to take an additional 30 damage from that 30 damaging attack with Hammer in, making it only a 2-prize knockout with a single prize Pokemon rather than a 3-turn knockout.
Definitely able to start applying that pressure in case Will doesn't have another Pokemon to bench here. Of course, we know that Will is sitting on the Pikachu in hand and a Nest Ball now.
And a Colress.
And a Colress.
And a Pokestop.
Of course, as Lucas, you're going to do your job here of putting on that pressure, knowing as well that this Duraludon is never in threat of getting knocked out this turn. Barring some miracle where Will can go from 1 in the Lost Zone to 7, and then also charge up something like that Pikachu.
That's asking a lot.
But that is a lot, especially from a first turn where all we did was Flower Select and pass it over. But we'll see what Will can string together here. Of course, has the Colress in hand, as we know, and the Flower Select, so we'll be able to at least get to 4 for sure. Vacuum on that Pokestop would be able to bring it up to like 6, but we'll have to see what this Colress yields for the rest of this turn.
Being able to vacuum a Pokestop and potentially putting another Pokestop too could give Will a lot more of that speed that he needs in order to get himself set up to start taking some big knockouts here soon. Because Lucas only sitting on 1 Duraludon and 1 Dialga can put Will in a potential opportunity to really close out this game a lot faster than it even looks.
Oh yeah, especially with Lucas having not that great of a start, having to use that Turo turn 1, not having anything other than the 1 Duraludon to bench here. Is definitely signaling for me that Lucas's hand is not very strong. So Will definitely want to try and capitalize on that here this turn. Start applying that pressure in an already pretty decent matchup, especially because of the fact that Lucas cannot take the knockout onto that Pikachu in 1 turn. Without the Duskmar, without the Starmie, Lost Box is definitely going to be favored inherently on paper here, but again, both of these decks can be kind of piles at times. They can have some pretty rough draws. It's very important that both of these decks find their supporters and they find their cards in the right orders, so you never actually know what's going to happen in a best of 1 game for Game 5 here.
Now, I am curious if that Nest Ball was the other card found off of that Comfey, because Lost Zoning 2 of the energies used for Pikachu, although you do play multiple, sometimes it is good to be able to keep those in the deck so you can manually attach to that Pikachu and not have to utilize the Mirage Gates for all of his attacking capabilities. Exactly. And then Lost Zoning that 3rd energy is a bit rough there, because that's going to be less energy for him to do things like retreat when he's starting to get low on switches, as well as being able to have more energy in the deck for Mirage Gate.
Exactly, yeah. Since we've sent 1 grass and 1 metal energy to the Lost Zone already, Will is going to have to play this game with only 1 copy of each for this Pikachu.
And 1 grass.
Only 1 grass to use and 1 metal to use, and the grass is already in the discard pile too.
Ooh, yeah. So
if we ever, it looks like there's a lightning, metal, and grass in the discard pile right now for Will. Seeing the lightning off of the Pokestop. We must have seen the other metal off of the Pokestop as well on turn 1. So to even attack with this Pikachu to start with, we're going to need to see that last lightning energy that we have access to in our hand, which I think Will does have access to in hand right now. But we also have to see a Super Rod to even begin taking knockouts.
Definitely doesn't put Will out of this at all. They do Lost Box decks do usually play anywhere from 3 to 4, more leaning towards the 4 Super Rods in the deck. So he does have that capability to get that back in relatively easily. It's just more about making sure that his resource management is as on point as possible for this matchup. You definitely don't want to commit those energy back into the deck until you are attacking with that Pikachu, especially now that you are down that grass and metal energy in the Lost Zone.
Oh, and Lucas going for the Pokestop here just to try to find something, and is still just drawing up blanks right now.
And this is the opportunity that Will needs in order to be able to push himself forward in this very easily, because if Lucas is not able to set down another Duraludon or retreat the one into that Dialga, this is going to put him very, very far behind on turns.
Exactly. It's going to be a very big uphill battle for Lucas here if we just go attach to Dialga and hammer in right now. One option would be to manually retreat this Duraludon, but that also might just be delaying the inevitable. If Will is able to just take a 2-prize knockout on to this Dialga V.
Playing a research, which I think in this particular point in time is more the correct option here. He really needs to find some more bench fillers, even if they're just not the greatest, something to get him back in this game so he is not completely shut out of his energy acceleration.
Exactly. It's still not terrible for Lucas if he can get into an Orchaludon attack this turn. 300 health versus 190 doesn't make much of a difference against Lost Zone because the Pikachu is going to one-shot it either way. So if Lucas can still just get an Orchaludon attacking here,
which it looks like he's
another
going
Duraludon
to
down, we can still start to see some prizes flowing and try to work towards something like that Star Chronos turn to maybe eventually close out the game. So we do have the Ultra Ball here, probably going to, I imagine, grab another Duraludon here, just so we can start responding again next turn.
And if only Lucas could have got to that Iono instead of the research in Lost Box, that Iono can be very, very damaging to Will's turns.
Oh, absolutely, especially after Will's had multiple turns now, just building up the hand. Had that Colress on last turn, used a few Comfeys, the Pokestops. I imagine that hand is starting to get pretty big for Will and pretty concerning for the side of Lucas.
Yeah, the way these turns have been coming out for Will, it almost feels like a NAIC build of Lost Box, which just happens to be splashing Pikachu. As you all know, Andrew Hedrick won NAIC 2024 with Turbo Lost Box, and his aim was to get through his deck as fast as humanly possible, get to that 7, and really just start putting the pressure on. And it feels like even though Will's first turn was a little bit on the slower end, these subsequent turns have been a good way for him to really turbo that lost zone up, and he will probably be going in for a pretty major attack this following turn.
Exactly, especially getting to 5 last turn was very important. Means that Will can get to 7 with just a Colress or with just the 2 Comfeys that they already have on the board.
He's also got that Lost Vacuum in hand as well.
That Lost Vacuum just able to guarantee the 7 right away once we use the Pokestop next turn. So we will see Mirage Gates for sure come online for Will this turn. It's just going to be the question of, can we get that Pikachu attack? There's that last switch card. I believe Will didn't have any other switch cards in hand, so that's going to be a very important piece for this turn.
Now, does he have another Colress Experiment in hand to use this turn?
That's going to be the question here, or do we have to use that Lost Vacuum? Duraludon gets some benefit from the Pokestop, but you would definitely prefer to keep that in play for future turns, especially if Lucas is going to start using things like the Iono. Will would love to have that extra consistency piece stay in play so that they can use it on turns after they get disrupted.
And he does have the Super Rod, so he's probably going to put the 3 Pikachu energy back in, if not 2, and maybe that Cramorant.
Yep, definitely signaling here that,
or the Fez,
that we're going to go for a Pikachu attack this turn. As we saw earlier, has that last Lightning in hand already. So we are able to go Nest Ball for that Fez along with that Super Rod. Going to try and Fez to find that last Colress here. See if we can turn on Mirage Gates before we Lost Zone that Pokestop.
And another little comment about the Pokestop. It is very good in Archelodon, but it's not as impactful as Lost Zone being able to flip 3. Lost Zone plays so many item cards that almost every time you use that thing, you're going to be flipping into a card that's going to really help you push yourself farther into your deck and into this game.
The joke I always like to make every time I use a Pokestop is I joke about getting to play 2 supporters every turn, especially when you grab 3 cards off of the Pokestop. Then it really feels like you're you're just cheating. You're getting to play a draw 3 supporter from the Pokestop on top of playing your Colress's Experiment for the turn. Even just grabbing 2 just feels so good for that Lost Zone deck.
Looks like Will opted to go ahead and Lost Zone a Pokestop. I could not see what the other card was there, but I did see a Prime Catcher out of that Colress's Experiment that he went ahead and added to his hand. That's also going to be a very, very good card for this matchup, because that means that Lucas will not be able to leave any of these 2 prize cards in the back line without them potentially just getting completely sniped by this Pikachu.
Oh, definitely. Definitely going to be a key piece for trying to go with like a 2/2/2 prize map for Will here, as they're going to be able to start doing. As long as they have this Mirage Gate in the hand, they'll be able to get that Pikachu knockout onto Archaludon, and Lucas does not have an attack ready to respond to it. The best thing that Lucas is representing right now would just be to attack for 120 if could go evolve into the Dialga V-Star and attach another energy. But
if Will is able to get 2 attacks off with this Pikachu, he's going to be in the driver's seat, I believe, for the rest of this game.
Oh, absolutely.
Because at that point, he doesn't really need to promote any 2 prizers to be able to take the game. He can slowly nickel and dime you with the Cramorant and the Sableye in order to take this match.
Especially already being down, I think we saw 1 Turo used by Lucas and the other one gone in that Professor's Research. So all that's left is the Scoop Up Cyclone and then the Pal Pad to try to recover some of those Turos. So especially if we start getting through with some of that Sableye math, not going to be able to reset the damage on those consistently turn after turn.
And Will doesn't even have to put all of that damage onto one Pokemon. He can split it up and basically make Lucas choose between 2 different Pokemon in hopes that he's not going to potentially get a multi-prize loss between turns.
Exactly, especially with Will playing, can just set up for a Blood Moon or Saluna turn as well to just end the game. If we can take 4 prize cards here with this Pikachu and then go into something like the Sableye, putting 6 onto 2 little Duraludons, we would in theory be able to set up for, okay, those have 6 on them, 240 with the Blood Moon or Ursaluna to take the last 2. But of course we see Will just sending that Sableye to the Lost Zone on this turn.
And it looks like Will's going to elect to utilize that Cramorant for more damage.
So I'm guessing we did not have a Mirage Gate in that giant hand. Oh, we did have a Mirage Gate. So just choosing to use the Prime Catcher this turn.
I feel like it might have been a little early there.
Trying to just take 2 prize cards back-to-back turns with the Cramorant here, knowing that Lucas is down both Professor's Turos, could be looking, and at least one of the V-Stars we saw go away off of the Pokestop. So potentially trying to just take 2 prize cards with Cramorant here, back-to-back turns. If Lucas cannot evolve or move this Dialga out of the active. It does only have 2 retreat costs, so considering that Lucas just used concealed cards, I'm guessing that we have another energy if we need to retreat this Dialga V and just take a knockout with the Archaludon. But I'm guessing that's the line that Will was looking for, was trying to just stick this Dialga here, knowing Lucas is running lower on those resources for resetting it.
Well, another nice thing, too, is knowing that both those Turos are in the discard pile, you can kind of leave this Archelodon up. It's going to prevent energy from being in the discard pile, so he's not going to be as likely to be able to really set up these Dialga V-Star plays as easily, especially if he ends up committing to a second one if this one goes down.
Oh, for sure. I do still have to question whether or not it would have been better to just take out the only attacker on Lucas's board.
I think it probably would have been a bit more beneficial because hitting for 220, that's another prize card down for Will here, for Lucas to be able to win this match. If he would have taken this knockout, Lucas wouldn't have been able to take a knockout on either of, or any of the Pokemon that were currently on the board without some sort of gusting effect and energy and a Dialga V-Star.
Mm-hmm. Which still, if I'm Will, I'm fine with that. If that's Lucas's turn, is to gust up like a Comfey and just take a knockout onto the Comfey with the Dialga V-Star, I am more than happy. Especially because since Lucas's build does not have a way to deal with the Pikachu EX, he needs to kind of go fast and just get ahead on the prize trade here. So Will opting into taking single prize turns essentially by taking 2 prizes over 2 turns. It's just giving Lucas time here, considering that Lucas got to start the prize trade and take that first knockout.
I don't know if I really liked this Iron Bundle play too much. Yes, it does put him down 1 comfy, but Will already is set up with his Pheasantipity as well as another comfy available. This is just going to make it a bit easier for Will to be able to set up that Pikachu play and really go for a knockout on this Archelodon, as well as leaving that Cramorant on board to be able to kind of clean up any of these other Pokemon on the board in the future.
Exactly. Will leaving that Cramorant on board, or Will getting to keep that Cramorant on board rather, and Lucas not finding the evolution onto the Dialga, just means that until Lucas finds the evolution onto the Dialga, it's always going to be a threat for Will to take a 2 prize knockout with a single prizer in the active.
Now, I'm wondering if the reason why Will didn't Mirage Gate is because maybe he had multiple of those energies in hand from all of his thinning.
Like after something like the Pheasantipity draws, yeah.
Because it looked like he did just go ahead and manually attach that grass energy.
That one was from the Iono. I have to remember that Lucas used Iono last turn.
Oh, he just manually attached that one, so I'm wondering if maybe that was the only energy left in the deck at that point in time, and he was maybe going to try and Mirage Gate before, and when he used his flower selectings, he might have drawn into those energies he super rotted.
So that might have been an instance where you were better off not super rotting and using the Fez before getting to 7, and you'd rather get to 7, use that Pokestop, use the Lost Vacuum, and then go Mirage Gate, Nest Ball out the Fez, and use the Gate right away before using Flip the Script to draw those extra cards.
Lost Zone is a very sequence-heavy deck, and sometimes even the smallest little misstep in sequencing can be very detrimental to your turn.
Exactly, and especially we're seeing those early energies getting Lost Zone, coming back to be a little bit punishing here for Will. Not having access to 2 copies of the Metal or 2 copies of the Grass definitely seems to be awkward when we're trying to get this Pikachu powered up. Yeah, only having 1 energy to accelerate here. Gonna have to hope that Will has a switching effect card so we can move the Comfy out of the active. I imagine we do. You play so many in this deck, but still definitely is awkward to see a Mirage Gate only get 1 energy. Not being able to prep up a retreat for a future turn here, with just so many energies in the Lost Zone already, and just so many clogging the hand, it looks like too. Has at least 1 water in the hand in addition to the grass that we attached for hand earlier.
Now, how many Iono does Lucas play? Because I've seen 2 so far this match.
Let's see here. I believe it's 2 or 3.
Because in this point in the game, Iono actually ends up becoming an even stronger card for this matchup. Because as Will gets lower and lower, it's going to make it harder and harder for Lucas to be able to disrupt. However, with Will still having 6 cards left, and Will not having very many cards left in the deck, a well-timed Iono could potentially make it much harder for Will to be able to really push himself back in, especially with only 1 Comfey.
Yeah, it can especially become awkward too. One thing that I've noticed from playing a lot of Lost Zone is that the entire game you're playing to get all of like the bad cards out of your deck, the ones that you don't need, so there's only good cards left in your deck. But you can get to a point where you just have too many good cards in your deck, so every time when you get Iono'd and you have to rebuild your hand and you're flower selecting, you're just so much more likely to see 2 good cards next to each other. And it makes your flower selecting is even more awkward because you have to get rid of a good card that you might need to win the game.
And I've definitely been in that position before. I haven't played Lost Box anywhere near as long as you, Tanner, but I have definitely experienced my fair share of some very unfortunate flower selectings. Ones where it felt like no matter which one you picked, you were going to be feeling it in the matchup.
Exactly. One of the things I like to joke about a lot was, at least when we had Battle VIP Pass, getting to play bad cards in my deck was a good thing for Lost Zone. And even after that, I always enjoy playing like a Pokegear in my deck, or like another niche one-off random supporter. I've played things like Hassel and Lacey before, just cards that are bad cards. So when you see them off of a flower selecting, you are very happy to quickly put them into the Lost Zone, because it's like, I'm playing a bad card in my deck for a reason. I don't have to think about sending that one away.
Well, I'm happy I was able to get you that full art Hassle for NAIC this year.
Oh, absolutely. I love Hassle. It was such a good card. I enjoyed playing it a lot.
I'm actually very curious to see that when post-rotation, when Roxanne leaves, if we might actually eventually end up seeing Hassle as a card that people might be interested in playing a little bit more, because being able to dig so many cards deep and find what you're looking for like that does seem very, very helpful alongside cards like Pheasantipity to help you find cards you need to be able to start to push some turns more in your favor.
Oh, for sure, especially to like close out games when people are using things like Unfair Stamp or Iono. Just being able to draw the Hassle off of that disruption and say, if my deck's thin enough, I am just going to look at the hand that I just Ionoed away and pick the 3 best cards from it, and I get to still have those to close out the game. It's definitely a very powerful effect in the right deck. And it definitely worked out for me in Lost Zone, that's for sure. At NAIC, I enjoyed it. But I wonder what other decks might be able to utilize it. Decks that are able to kind of turbo through their deck. I wonder if maybe like a 1 copy of Hassle in Raging Bolt is something that I might want to mess around with and try.
That could be very interesting, especially if you've already committed a lot of energy to the board. You're already set up for a follow-up attack, being able to just look for some other retrieval cards like Energy Retrieval, or even just like a 1 prizer or something that you might need for the situation.
Exactly, just being able to off of the Ionos, because you're already thinning your deck so much between things like that Squawk ability, between drawing so many extra cards, and using like Sadas and Ultra Balls, just thinning your deck so much. Having something like that Hassle could be important.
So it looks like Lucas went ahead and took 2 more prize cards here off of that Pheasantipity. If I'm Will, as much as I would love to get that Pheasantipity back to really draw some more cards, I think we're now in a situation where the only 2 prizer that he can leave on board is going to be that Pikachu. Will is probably going to be looking to try and power up that Pikachu and maybe disrupt the hand with something like Roxanne, or even potentially trying to go even farther by maybe even counter-catching up that Pheasantipity and taking a knockout with the Pikachu that way.
Taking a knockout on that Pheasantipity would be really, really good, just to disrupt Lucas's ability to draw and find whatever pieces that he may need to close the game. Another option would to be do something like Boss's Orders on that Dialga V and cash in on having that extra energy on it from that first Cramorant attack to be able to just take 2 prize cards with the Cramorant.
Now it does look like Will only has the 2 energy left in his deck right now. Or no, it looks like there might be 1 or 2 more cards. It's getting very deceptively small, so it's kind of hard to tell exactly like what we got here.
Probably about a 5-card deck at this point, so a chorus would deck us out here, is what it's kind of looking like right now. But it looks like we do for sure, having seen only a few switch cards be used, being able to charge up this Pikachu and take the knockout still onto the Dialga with the Cramorant is just saying, if you don't win this turn, I have it next turn with this Pikachu. This Pikachu just being able to one-shot any 2 prizer that Lucas leaves into the active. So just trying to put Lucas in that awkward position. And without the extra Duraludons on the board, Lucas is not going to be able to threaten something like a knockout onto the Blood Moon or Ursaluna this turn. So I have to wonder what the play could be from Lucas here.
Now, one thing I actually teched at our most recent challenge that we had, I knew it wasn't the greatest tech, but I was a little bit afraid of, with the new format, there being a lot of stall variants out there right now. I actually teched a single Canceling Cologne into my Archelodon deck, and in this particular situation, if Lucas had that, he could guarantee the game with the Boss's Orders.
Yeah, just having that 1 would have been so huge for this game. I have to wonder if Will does go on to win this game, as looking like Will is pretty favored right now in the board state, if Lucas's not just deck choice, but also lists adjust a little bit based on what Will brought today. If Lucas does choose to play either the Canceling Cologne, the Starmie, or the Dusknoir variant, expecting to have to go through this Pikachu again. I'm thinking what Lucas can do here. The best line I can think of at this point right now would be to just hope that Will doesn't have another Gust. We've seen the Prime Catcher be used. We've seen the Boss be used. And we've seen the Pal Pad get lost zoned as well from Will. So if Lucas can just leave a single prizer in the active, Will would not be able to gust up something like the Pheasantipity or the Archaladon to win the game.
The problem with this, though, is Lucas is in a specific situation where he really kind of just needs to be able to punch, because Will at this point isn't going to set any more 2-prize liabilities on the board for Lucas to take a 1-hit. He's either got to find a way to potentially stall Will out here to where he can maybe find a way to win this without that Pikachu coming up into the active, or even potentially go for a deck out. But I believe Will still has switch cards available, so I don't think that is going to be a viable option here.
Yeah, thinking of your outs as Lucas, you've got to be thinking about deck out. You've got to be thinking about as well. I'm thinking of a world where you can go Boss's Orders onto the Pikachu here, and if you were able to attack for 30 with a Duraludon just to pop the ability on it. Of course, Will still having the switch card to be able to fully heal it. You'd have to do it too many times in a row.
But even bossing up that Pikachu.
As long as he can switch card, take the damage off of it, then it would not be able to knock out with the Duraludon the next turn.
Pikachu
two bosses in a row.
The Pikachu just takes the knockout for the last
you take one onto the Duraludon.
Yeah, he shouldn't have promoted the Arch.
You do it on the Duraludon, not the Archaladon.
I see what you're saying.
If you do it with an Archaladon, you can pop the ability for it,
Yeah.
and potentially say, okay, if you don't have specifically a switch card in your hand, I can try to boss a second time next turn and KO with the Archaladon.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
But yeah, so that is game 5 here. We're going to go to a little bit of a break as we're deciding on the next round.
I was lost zoning a lot. all for watching us make all the mistakes.
So, I guess, yeah, final words from the players. We're going to call it here for today, get a little bit of a refresh, make it out to the challenge over at Jay's West. So we're going to be back tomorrow at noon for round 2 bracket reset.
Might
Everything on
start
the
a little later than noon because you
Yeah.
said you have something.
Yeah,
till
I'm working till
noon.
noon, so
So
probably
look
like
for it at
1.
like 12:30 or 1 if we got it already set up. It might be nice to just quick into it. So thanks for watching, y'all. Sorry about
Thanks everyone for listening along.
Did you say what I said to you in the mic?
Yeah, I transposed some of it back a
Thank
little
you.
bit later, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for commentating. That's
Yeah,
super cool.
appreciate it.
And
Congratulations
I think
again,
this
Will
shows
Lucas,
what
making it
Atlas
this
is capable
far.
of. Yeah, in case you don't know, we're at Atlas, so come support them.
I gave the shout out when Tanner walked out there the first